Meeting to order, the Planning Commission meeting for Emeryville, June 28th, 2012.
Roll call.
We have our visiting attorney back with us. Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Okay,
So you ready for a roll call?
we're ready for a roll call.
Commissioner Cardoza,
Here.
Commissioner Coomerly,
Here.
Commissioner Moss is expected shortly, Commissioner Sherman,
Here.
Commissioner Steinberg,
Present.
Vice Chair Flores,
Here.
Chair Donaldson.
Here.
We have a quorum of 6 commissioners.
Okay, rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. This is the time on our agenda for public comment for items that are not listed on the agenda. Is there anyone wishing to speak on something that's not on the agenda? Okay. Seeing no one, we have the minutes from our May 24th meeting.
Move approval.
Second.
Actually, I have one slight change,
Me too.
and that was on the commissioner comments for opening the gates on Saturday for the community use. I was hoping for weekends, as opposed to just Saturday.
So, so this is on page,
This is on
Page
page
two.
2,
all right.
under commissioner comments.
Okay. And, so under where it says Saturday, it should say weekends? Okay.
Any other edits?
I have an addition to page 1, study session 5A. I recused myself due to a conflict. It's not reflected in the minutes.
Oh, that's right, okay.
Okay, with those revisions, do we have any motion?
Move approval.
And second.
Okay,
So
Commissioner
is-
Sherman moved approval and Vice Chair Flores seconded.
That's without objection, I assume?
Yes.
Without objection, okay.
Okay.
And we have the director's report.
Right, we have a couple of special orders of the day, which we're putting under director's reports tonight. We have two of our good friends who are leaving us for greener pastures, Commissioner Flores and our General Plan and Zoning Update Project Manager, Deborah Diamond. We have prepared resolutions of the Planning Commission for each of them. And at this point, I would like to have Chair Donaldson do the honors for Commissioner Flores.
Okay, this is resolution of the Planning Commission number FF, I suppose that's for Frank Flores, 1201. Resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Emeryville expressing the Commission's sincere appreciation to Frank Flores for his 6 years of service on the Emeryville Planning Commission. Whereas Frank Flores was nominated to the Emeryville Planning Commission by Mayor Ruth Atkin and was appointed by the City Council on July 18th, 2006 by a unanimous vote. And whereas Frank's current term on the commission expires on June 30th, 2012, and he has indicated to the City Council that he is abandoning Emeryville and moving to Oakland, gasp, and therefore is ineligible for reappointment for an overall commission tenure of exactly 6 years. And whereas Frank served as vice chair of the commission from July 2009 to June 2010, and again from July 2011 to June 2012, and as chair from July 2010 to July 2011. And whereas in addition to serving as both chairman and vice chairman of the Planning Commission, Frank also served as a member of the Housing Committee. His experience in education and planning has brought good recommendations for the Planning Commission's decisions. And whereas Frank's attention-getting last-minute arrivals at the Planning Commission meetings will be much missed, And whereas Frank maintained smile on his face and a cool demeanor through lengthy meetings, he brought balance to the commission with his perspectives. And whereas Frank's relaxed and casual manner of operations has made us all wish we had made a previous resolution to install a large, comfortable couch and coffee table from which to conduct commission meetings. Whereas Frank takes the honor of being the best-dressed planning commissioner. And and whereas it has been a pleasure sitting on the dais with Frank, his insightful perspectives are occasionally inspirational. I wish him much success in Oakland. Will I miss Frank? No way. Just kidding. And whereas Frank will be missed on the commission, but the bigger pond of Oakland may provide an equally, if not more stimulating place for his swimming activities, should he choose to dive in. And whereas Frank is jumping from our small pond into a much bigger pond, where we are sure he'll be able to keep his head above water while swimming with the big fish. And whereas, in all seriousness, Frank's thoughtful and insightful comments and wisdom on a variety of long-range and current planning issues will be greatly missed. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Planning Commission hereby expresses its sincere appreciation to Frank Flores for his 6 years of outstanding service, friendship, warmth, humor, and compassion to the city of Emeryville and its citizens, and wishes him the best of luck in all his future endeavors. And this was approved, or do we need to vote on it?
Probably should have.
I move approval.
Is there a vote? We have a motion
Second?
Second.
and a second, okay. Commissioner Kumale and Commissioner Sherman, and we could vote on this.
Do you want to take a roll call, or do you want to do it without exception?
I think-
Any public comments?
Oh, God, no.
I think without exception.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
You will get a copy signed and I assume framed and.
Okay. So you will have a framed copy
All right.
Oh, that's excellent.
with the signatures on it as soon as it's signed.
Thank you. Well, it's definitely been a pleasure and a ride. 10 years in Emeryville and 6 years on this commission and 8 on housing advisory. And I've seen a lot of change even just in those 10 years. And it's, from my perspective, mostly positive. I would say 95% positive. We can't see utopia, but I think Emeryville strives for it. I'll miss the city, but I'll drive through it every day, and I've got 2 active projects here, so I'll continue to be in Emeryville at least twice a day. And I don't think I'll get over missing all my fun spots, my coffee shops, my Arizmendi's and everything. So I'll still be around, and I'll still pop in and say hi to everybody. So thank you very much, staff. Thank you very much, fellow commissioners. And I look forward to my last meeting.
And the next special order of the day is to wish farewell to our General Plan and Zoning Update Project Manager, Deborah Diamond. I think you should go to the dais so you can be publicly embarrassed.
Debbie Diamond.
Podium. All
Are
right.
you ready to be publicly embarrassed? I'm ready. Resolution CPC number DD for Deborah Diamond. We've got DD and FF. 1201. Resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Emeryville expressing the Commission's sincere appreciation to Deborah Diamond for almost 9 years of service to the City of Emeryville. Whereas Deborah Diamond, AICP, is a certified planner with over 30 years of experience, having previously served the cities of Appleton, Wisconsin, Los Angeles, Hayward, Oakland, and Berkeley. And whereas on September 23, 2003, Deborah was hired as an interim senior planner and was the case planner for a number of major development projects, including Blue Star Corner Townhouses, Avenue 64 Apartments, Artisan Walk Condominiums, Oak Walk Mixed-Use Project, Ambassador Housing Apartments, Sherman-Williams Plan Unit Development and Environmental Impact Report, Bay Street Residential Apartments and Condominiums, and Pixar Plan Unit Development Expansion and Mitigated Negative Declaration. Whereas, on August 24, 2004, Deborah was hired as the General Plan and Zoning Update Project Manager, a position she has held up to the present time. And whereas, as project manager, Deborah has overseen the preparation and adoption of the new Emeryville General Plan and its EIR, the Emeryville Design Guidelines, the 2009 to 2014 housing element, and the new pedestrian and bicycle plan, as well as the substantial completion of the new zoning ordinance. And whereas preparation and adoption of the general plan covered a 5-year period during which over 50 public steering committee meetings, 7 community workshops, and a number of planning commission and city council joint meetings, study sessions, and public hearings were held. Stakeholder interviews and a community survey were conducted. A number of flyers, postcards, and newsletters were mailed to the entire Emeryville community, and 16 background reports and documents were prepared, including the Opportunities and Challenges Report, Draft Plan Framework, Draft General Plan, and the Environmental Impact Report, all of which was overseen, coordinated, and orchestrated by Deborah. And whereas Deborah was wise enough to know that steering committee members can be grumpy and ill-tempered if they're hungry, and so always made sure they were well-fed at their meetings. And whereas, due in no small part to Deborah's hard work, the Emeryville General Plan was honored with an Award of Merit from the American Planning Association, California Chapter Northern Section. And whereas preparation of the design guidelines involved dealing with the variable and unpredictable design sensibilities of the Planning Commission, City Council, and general public, which taught her the true meaning of the saying, "Beauty is in the eye of the beholder." And whereas preparation of the housing element involved dealing with the variable and unpredictable rules, regulations, and procedures of the State Department of Housing and Community Development, who insisted that she tell them not only where every single housing unit in the city is going to be located in the next 5 years, but also the affordability level of each and every unit, which allowed her to make good use of her crystal ball, and ultimately resulted in the state certifying the housing element. And whereas preparation of the pedestrian and bicycle plan involved working with the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Subcommittee and its entourage of bicycle and pedestrian fanatics who have lots of energy and good ideas and have the best interests of the Emeryville community at heart, but can sometimes be a handful. And whereas the zoning update has been Deborah's nemesis since before the new general plan was adopted, is now substantially complete thanks to her perseverance, will be immeasurably better than the existing zoning ordinance, but is probably the last straw that finally drove her to look elsewhere for gainful employment. And whereas Deborah has now found greener pastures in the green fields of Pleasanton, a pleasant city over the hill that's not nearly as exciting as Emeryville, but which needs help in implementing its housing element and climate action plan. So Deborah has agreed to ride to the rescue. And whereas Deborah's impressive record of accomplishments in Emeryville is reflected in the report on implementation of the general plan that she prepares annually, the most recent of which shows progress on 118 of 133 implementation actions. And whereas in her typical modest and self-effacing manner, Deborah will probably deny any credit for any of the above accomplishments, but the commission knows it is true and will miss her greatly. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Planning Commission hereby expresses its sincere appreciation to Deborah Diamond for almost 9 years of outstanding service, professionalism, expertise, hard work, good judgment, warmth, and compassion to the city of Emeryville and its citizens, and wishes her the best of luck in all of her future endeavors. Is there a motion to... So we need a motion to approve that resolution.
Move to approve.
Second.
It's
Multiple
moved and
seconds.
everyone seconded it, so without opposition, approved. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Deborah. We will miss you and all of your hard work.
Thank you so much for all those kind words. It's been a great ride, as Frank said, and I've really enjoyed working with all of you. I think Emeryville's extremely special, and mostly because of the members of the community who work so hard to make it special. I think it's a really well-planned city, thanks to all of your efforts, and I will miss you all and miss Emeryville a lot. So it's hard to say goodbye, but I've really enjoyed working here. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll miss you, and don't be a stranger.
Yeah, I'll come back.
Well, I'll probably see you in Pleasanton, I hope.
So I have Commissioner Flores's signed resolution now in the frame. I'm still struggling to put Deborah's in the frame, but I'll give it to her.
Thanks, Trevor.
I forgot to say one thing. I'm going to leave you with a going away present. I have copies of the newly adopted pedestrian and bicycle plan, which I will bring over in a minute.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
parting gift.
Please sign it.
All right,
All right, ready for the rest of the director's report?
I
This-
guess
This
so.
is the boring part, I'm afraid, but, well, maybe not that boring. I'd like to let you know what the city council has been doing for the last month since your last meeting. They've had 2 meetings on June 5th and June 19th. On June 5th, they held interviews for the 2 seats on the Planning Commission. And on the 5th, they interviewed Sean Moss, Liz Altieri, and Kay Tan. Rachel Joy Rodis's interview was postponed to June 19th because of a family emergency, so she did have her interview on June 19th. Brian Donahue was a no-show for his interview, and the council is expected to make the appointments on July 17th. The council introduced an ordinance allowing the Public Works Director to authorize weekend work in non-residential areas. This is an amendment to the noise ordinance to replace private sewer laterals, and that ordinance passed on June 19th. The council also introduced an ordinance on June 5th to amend the municipal code provisions about city parks, including making loitering in a park a misdemeanor, creating a standardized 10 p.m. closure time for all parks, a requirement for a community events permit in order to have alcohol in a city park, allowing dogs off-leash in designated off-leash areas in anticipation of future dog parks, and allowing bicycle riding in parks in a safe and courteous manner, and requiring cyclists to yield to pedestrians. That ordinance was also passed on June 19th. The council approved a Transportation Committee recommendation from the BPAC for an anti-harassment of bicyclists ordinance, and also for 3 bicycle fix-it stations, which are tools on bungee cords, basically, as I understand it. I've never actually seen one. There would be 3 in the city, 1 at Doyle Hollis Park along the Greenway, 1 at Shorebird Park along the Bay Trail, and 1 at a location to be determined. Then on June 19th, the council approved the budget for the next 2 fiscal years on the consent calendar. That followed, of course, a number of meetings and presentations on the budget that had previously been held in May and June. The council approved a contract with Deborah Diamond through December 31st to be the general plan update project manager, but obviously that is now a moot point. And the council also approved 2 items related to WC3, which is the building division's consultant for plan check, building inspections, and office administration. One of those issues was an amendment to their current contract to cover plan check services for the Ambassador and Parkside projects, and the other was a new contract with them for the next 2 upcoming fiscal years. I also want to mention a couple of things about the zoning update. First is related to the composition of the steering committee, and for this, I would like to ask the commission if you would agree to make a recommendation to the council. We need to clean up the steering committee roster, and it involves one of your representatives on the committee. So I'd like to just ask for a commission recommendation to the council on this. There would be actually a number of changes. First, Commissioner Coomerly, as you know, is on the steering committee. In fact, she's the chair of the steering committee, but she was appointed as a resident member, I believe, before she was on the planning commission. Commissioner Hoff, of course, has resigned, and that leaves a vacancy on the steering committee for a planning commission representative. Seems logical that Commissioner Kummerly should be the third planning commission representative, and then that vacancy in a resident position that would be created would be eliminated. Former Commissioner Patty Jeffrey was also a resident member of the committee, and she has resigned from the committee, so we would propose to eliminate that position. And the business position, which was formerly occupied by Ron Mooney, who resigned quite a while ago, is also vacant. We would propose eliminating that position. So the committee would then have a total of 10 members, 2 council members who are council members Davis and Brinkman, 3 commissioners, which is Commissioner Kummerly, Donaldson, and Sherman, school representative, which is Miguel Dwin, and 4 residents, which are Chris Owens, Carol Handelman, Robin Orden, and Liz Altieri. So I would like to ask at this time for the commission to approve a recommendation to the city council to make those revisions to the steering committee roster.
Approval?
Second.
Does anyone have any objections to that? It sounds like a good recommendation.
Now, regarding upcoming meetings of the steering committee and recent meetings, the committee met on June 11th and reviewed a number of key issues that had previously been identified by the committee. That included development bonuses, parking and loading, affordable housing, density bonuses for affordable housing, performance standards, and telecommunications. The next meeting is scheduled for July 24th, at which we hope to have all of Chapter 4, which is the site development regulations, and Chapter 5, which is the citywide use and development regulations, ready for the committee to review. And then at the August 28th meeting, we hope to have the entire code ready for review and approval. However, there are tentatively meetings of the Oversight Board scheduled for both July 24th and August 28th here in the council chambers. So those of you who are on the steering committee have already received an email from Deborah's successor as the secretary of that committee, which is Diana Kina, polling you for alternative meeting dates. So please get back to her so we can try to figure out when we're going to meet in July and August. I wanted to let you know also that we plan to hold a community meeting in late September, probably on a Saturday, probably the 22nd or the 29th. And that will be a topic of discussion for the next steering committee meeting. A joint session of the Planning Commission and the City Council has also been scheduled for Tuesday, October 23rd. I know that's news to some of you, and I apologize for that. Due to the timing, we weren't able to come to you first to ask about this, but the council has approved this, and the steering committee has agreed to it. So I hope that you all are available on Tuesday, October 23rd. That's the 4th Tuesday in October. It would normally be a zoning update steering committee meeting date, but hopefully the committee will be finished by that time. So this will be a joint study session on the new zoning ordinance for both the commission and the council to discuss it. And then we will come back to the commission probably at your December 13th meeting for a public hearing and approval. I hope that works for everybody.
6:30 time?
The joint meeting, that is yet to be determined. The commission meets at 6:30. The council usually meets at 7:15. When we have these joint meetings, depending on how much we have to do, we sometimes meet earlier or later. I would anticipate this being at least a 3-hour meeting. So it might be 6 to 9 or 6:30 to 9:30 or something like that. A couple of other things. The U.S. Green Building Council is holding its national conference in California for the first time this year. It will be from November 14th to 16th in San Francisco, and we have a scholarship available from stopwaste.org to send one planning commissioner to this conference. So if any of you is interested, please indicate, because this has to be, I have been told that this has to be decided by the end of the fiscal year, which is tomorrow. Okay. November 14th to 16th. I believe that's a Wednesday through a Friday. Peter, Schultz, Allen, and Miru will also be attending the conference. So does anybody want to go to a free green building conference? Commissioner Jeffrey went to this conference on the same scholarship in Seattle about 4 or 5 years ago, I think.
I'd be willing.
Sounds like we have some interest. Maybe we can chat with you afterwards and see what we...
We may be able to fund a second commissioner out of the commission training budget if there's interest by 2 commissioners. Okay, well, let me know before the end of tonight so I can get back to Peter, or you can get back to Peter. Somebody needs to tell Peter. Thank you. And then finally, I just wanted to let you know that your next meeting on July 26th, it appears about 99% that we will cancel that meeting because we don't have any items for the agenda. July 26th. So we'll see you on August 23rd. Wells Fargo, it's still moving forward, but we're still doing some analysis of the proposed left turn lane, and that analysis will not be finished in time to have a hearing in July. We anticipate bringing it back in August. Right. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you may have. Okay.
Very much. On to the public hearing portion of the agenda. First one on the agenda, fire station number 2. Is that Arlie?
For you, unlike last month. Good evening, commissioners. Good to see you all again. So before you is an extension for Fire Station 2, which is a project that was originally approved 2 years ago by this commission. It is one of the projects that falls under Ordinance 10-006, which allowed for the extension or the expansion of extensions for certain projects. So instead of 2 one-year extensions, certain projects listed, including this one before you tonight, are allowed 1 2-year extension and then 1 1-year extension following that, due to some of the fiscal constraints that a lot of projects were facing. So before you is the first 2-year extension proposed for the project, and there would still be that 1-year extension for a final expiration date of 2015. I'm going to go through a few slides, refresh you on the project. There are also a few boards before you in front of me if you want to glance at those, and then open to any questions at the end, of course. So the current Fire Station 2 sits on the corner of 63rd and Hollis. The project proposes demolishing the existing fire station because of seismic issues, where updating it would be about equal in cost to creating a new one. So that's the city's preference, is to build a new station. This is the site plan of the new station. It's approximately the same layout of what we have now, where the building is facing Hollis right at the corner, and there's a parking and storage area in the rear. The apron is in the same place, but is larger so that trucks can sit on it now. There's a classroom space. The main building has the trucks to the north and the structure to the south, and then again parking and a small patio in the back, with the practice building at the far rear or west of the site. Looking at the floor plans here, you can see there are a few storage and the turnout rooms at the far north edge of the building, 3 bays as opposed to the current 2, in case the station needs to expand in the future. And then on the ground floor, on the far right corner, you see that's a kind of classroom community space. There's a small lobby in front, and then most of the portion to the left is the fireman's kind of private area, like the kitchen and day use room. And then upstairs is only above the main portion of the building, not the bays, and it contains the bunk rooms, the weight room, the bathrooms. It's all restricted area. No members of the public will be there. Here you see the Hollis frontage, the bays on the right. There are obviously 3 now, the windows above bring light in. They used some of the same materials. There's a brick and also corrugated metal used here. There's a small front plaza on the left side, which you'll see better in a rendering coming up. And then here's the 63rd Street frontage. There's some bike parking adjacent to the front door, which is marked by the flagpole there. There's a private patio behind a short brick wall, and then the rear gate is a little farther to the west for the pull-in when trucks are returning. Here you see the landscape plan. There are some trees being removed, which I'll show you, and then some trees being replanted here. Primarily, you see patio and some ground cover and lawn in the front areas. Here is a map of the trees on site. The green trees in circles are staying. They're existing trees. The red trees are coming out. Some of them are due to the change in the site layout. For example, this will be where trucks are pulling in and out. The same with this one. These two trees need to come out not only due to construction, but also because trees actually shouldn't be between the sidewalk and the street on Hollis. There's a 36-inch sewer main below it that prevents full growth trees from being there. So when they come out, they will stay out, and they'll be replaced with 3 trees in the front lawn area that's here. So there's the map of the trees. Here you see a rendering from 63rd and Hollis. This is the front patio I spoke of. There's a bench here for public use. This is the main front door. And then this is a small patio with access to the classroom space that I spoke of. The apron here is large enough for the trucks to sit fully out when they're being washed to encourage interaction with the public as they walk by. And then this is an angle from 63rd looking towards Hollis, which is up on the right. This is the gate that trucks will pull into when they're returning, and the patio where firemen have a small private outdoor space. The findings that need to be made to extend an existing entitlement are that they're clearly documented good faith effort to commence work. As I mentioned in my staff report, there has been a lack of funding. The grant that we were hoping to apply for is no longer in existence. Obviously, the city is keeping its eyes open, but would like to keep these entitlements alive in case funding appears in the future. This project needs to be in the best interest of the city to extend the permit. Obviously, this is replacing a life safety facility, which serves the Emeryville population, so I think that's clear. And then there should not be any substantial changes to the project or the circumstances surrounding it, as well as any CEQA review, and that is all true. No changes are being made to this project. With that, staff recommends approval of the project with one small change to the existing conditions of approval, which simply updates, or excuse me, corrects a typo that was in the condition for approval and of effectiveness and duration. It's accidentally said that the extension was only 1 year. Obviously, as I explained, it's a 2-year extension with a final expiration date of 2015. So that language has been updated and was in your staff report. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
This will take about a year to construct, you think?
I don't remember the exact timeline for construction. That seems right, but I'm not an expert at construction.
So what happens during the interim, as far as capacity? Would all emergencies be handled out of the other fire station?
That would be the case. That situation is obviously improved by the fact that we are now contracting out with the County of Alameda. And so, any fire stations surrounding that are also under their contract, I believe, could help. But I will let Margaret O'Brien, who is in Public Works, is the official applicant here, so I'll let her answer any questions that you may have.
Hi, yes, it'll take about a year to construct. And as for the idea at the time was to double up on Fire Station 1 and perhaps find someplace within the city, a temporary housing, if necessary, to put some of the firefighters in.
Okay, so we're covered.
Like we did with the police station.
Good. So you'd set up a temporary substation of sorts?
Of sorts,
Okay. Thank you.
if we get fortunate to get that far.
Questions for the applicant or the staff?
I have 2 questions. So we can approve an extension of the entitlements after the entitlements have expired, since they expired about 4 days ago?
Yes, we've done it retroactively before.
Okay.
It's not a problem.
And then my other question is, can we go back to the slide of the like, I think it was the first rendering?
Oh, that's good, okay. They went.
Go back, forward a couple more. There you go, that one, yeah.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
I was just curious. So it looks like there's a bench there near the entry and some things on the wall. Does that represent a possible location for public art?
Those are, at the existing fire station, that art that you see on the wall is already there. The two fire trucks, does this go? Oh, there we go. These two fire trucks there's a gate over here, and that's where they sit. And then where's Spot? Spot's around there somewhere too.
Facing Hollis.
Yeah, he might be facing Hollis. So yes, that's the public art that's existing on the building now and would be reused. And then, yes, the benches to allow people to sit and enjoy. It's a really nice building. I want to build it.
Any other questions?
It's the only other thing that I noticed with our new approval of the design guidelines is that the sidewalks should be a little wider than they are here. Is that something that could be just dealt with later or with a slight amendment, or is that going to be an entire ball of wax we're opening up?
The Emeryville design guidelines, which I guess were adopted after this was approved, have a provision in them that says that if there is an area plan with design guidelines that covers the area, then the area plan supersedes the citywide design guidelines.
Okay.
In this case, the North Hollis plan was adopted several years ago, and that would preempt the citywide guidelines, and this project was evaluated with regard to those guidelines.
Will this be designed to any LEED standards?
Yes, it will be.
What are you trying to achieve?
It would have to be LEED Gold at this point, I believe.
It's ambitious.
No, I don't think, it's in our green building.
Gold or silver?
Silver was through 2010, and I believe gold is now starting 2011.
Good.
Does that mean you're converting to bay-friendly landscaping instead of lawn and around the front of the building?
Would be bay-friendly landscaping, but there's not enough lawn around the front of the building for it to go against the bay-friendly standards.
All right, thank you. So this is a public hearing. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak? I'm opening the public hearing. Seeing no one, close the public hearing. Any comments, discussion, motions?
I'd make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, Commissioner Cardoza,
Aye.
Commissioner Coomerly,
Aye.
Commissioner Moss,
Aye.
Commissioner Sherman,
Aye.
Commissioner Steinberg,
Yes?
Vice Chair Flores,
Aye.
Chair Donaldson.
Aye.
7 ayes, the extension application is approved.
That was moved by Commissioner
Cardoza.
Bardosa and seconded by Sherman. Okay. All right. The next item on the agenda is the Shellmound Design Guidelines.
Thank you and good evening. I'm Michelle de Guzman. I'm with the Economic Development and Housing Department. This is actually an item that has been continued from the January 26th Planning Commission meeting. So we will be brief, but we're going to recap the guidelines a bit and let you know how we've made changes since January as well and what activities we've undertaken. Just as a quick overview, the design guidelines are for a streetscape for a project area of Shellmound Street between 64th and Christie Avenue. It is envisioned as a retail district, and as such, it is anchored by Bay Street and the public market projects. The goal is to create an urban district through streetscape improvements and design recommendations to enhance the pedestrian experience and support the commercial activities in that area. The uses for the guidelines will be an amendment to the Emeryville design guidelines, as Charlie just mentioned, to be essentially an area plan. It will be implemented as projects are redeveloped and where a nexus exists with that redevelopment, and would be applicable to either design review applications or capital improvement projects through the CIP. Just some background, we started this back in 2005. we put it on hold due to the fact that there was some activity related to Bay Street and the public market, and we wanted to improve particularly the area underneath the Powell Street Bridge. And we later expanded it to both sides of Shellmound Street and to cover the area that I described earlier. The project was put on hold in 2007 to allow for development of site planning for the public market and Site B projects. Also because we were having very complex and not fruitful discussions with the ownership of the former Woodfin Suites property. And also there was an economic slowdown. So the drive to really get them in place was not as urgent given other constraints we were experiencing. However, we're ready to move forward now because there's been some improvements in the economy, which we're very excited about. There's evidence of new investment in the area. The purchase of the former Woodfin Hotel by Hyatt, and I apologize ahead of time if I call Hyatt Woodfin, and the Wells Fargo property, which is moving forward as well. And also we want to update the plans, or we have updated the plans to address the most likely development scenarios for both the public market and Bay Street, given the approval of a PUD for the public market and the Site B project hopefully moving forward. Just a little background on what we've done in terms of getting review and input on this. It's been a long project, so there's been a lot of input. We started with initial meetings before we had anything with just Bay Street and Madison before we really expanded the project. Over time, we've met with all of the property owners that are within the project area. We've gone to the community twice with community meetings, as well as we've gone to the BPAC and the Public Art Committee. And we've come to you 3 times. Well, this is the 4th time. So we're hoping the 4th time is a charm. At the January 2012 public hearing, we were given direction to continue the item so that there was additional time for the property owners to review and comment on the draft document, to hold a community meeting, as well as to solicit additional comment and feedback from city staff, all of which activities we have completed since the January meeting. We had a community meeting on May 31st where we presented the major elements of the plan. It was generally felt that the members of the community were supportive of the guidelines and supportive of the goals of the guidelines. TMG Partners, who is the owner of the public market project and really probably encompasses about 2/3 of the project area, presented a near-term solution to create a more visually active and aesthetically pleasing environment, which consisted of really addressing the areas under the Powell Street Bridge and in front of the hotel through new planting treatments and a public art concept. And we feel that this concept that was put forth was a pretty great idea and would help actually to support something that can be done in the near term given the long-term outlook of implementing the guidelines, although the purpose of the guidelines is really to address the deficiencies in the public infrastructure that currently exist. This is a bit of a long slide, but I'll go through it anyway since it's the meat of what's occurred since January. Given all of the discussions, we had several additional one-on-one meetings with the property owners, as well as input we received at the community meeting and from staff. And we made more revisions to the document to make it more specific of the site conditions, to allow greater flexibility, also to address market conditions, because obviously the market, being a retail area, the market is very sensitive in this area, and we want to make sure that the design guidelines support our pedestrian goals, but also meet the other goal of supporting the commercial activities in the area. And we also wanted to better achieve the goals of the general plan. So one of the things was that private property owners wanted to have additional flexibility in terms of the streetscape. So we made it clear that if they wanted to do a higher standard than what's put in the guidelines, they're certainly welcome to do so. However, they'll have to maintain those privately as well. The standards that are in the guidelines are ones that city staff feels are able to be maintained with the city's resources. The street tree section was revised again to reflect the site conditions, particularly issues with a high saline water table and contamination at the site, as well as being sensitive to the visibility of ground floor retail signage. Lighting should be dark sky compliant. This is being in line with our general plan. Existing master sign programs would take precedence. And there was a renewed emphasis on the Powell Street Bridge and the environment around there, particularly underneath the bridge, and creating that link between the Bay Street project and the public market project. We've looked at a potential mid-block crossing. That was one of the things that was actually brought up by one of the developers, that this was a pedestrian plan. And the span between Shellmound Way and Christie is so long, and there's no pedestrian crossings there. So we have looked at a potential for a mid-block crossing in that area. The exact location would be subject to traffic analysis and also the adjacent site development to make sure that that mid-block crossing worked with how those sites were redeveloped, as well as also recommended by one of the developers, putting in an on-street parking option on a portion of Shellmound Way between Shellmound Street between Christie and Shellmound. Again, this would be requested by the developers, part of the redevelopment of the adjacent property, and this would also be based upon feasibility with traffic impact and compatibility with the proposed project. If you have questions about that last item, I ask you to hold them because my WRTR consultant is here, and we'll go over that in a little bit more detail in this presentation. With that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce John Gibbs, who is with WRT and was our consultant in developing the guidelines.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Commission. It's great to be back here. I think this is an exciting culmination of a lot of work, and a lot of work just in the last couple of months since we were last here in refining these documents and refining the plan and the guidelines and making it, I think, more successful for the development community, still retaining all the important pedestrian aspects for this plan. I think it's really exciting how it's moving forward. There was a lot of good ideas that were brought forward recently, and we've been able to incorporate the best of those. So I'm going to go through the presentation. Obviously, I'm not going to go page by page through the plan. So this is really a summary, and it gets at the highlights and the intent of these guidelines, especially for our public audience, because I know you guys have heard this before. So the project area is primarily focusing on Shellmound Street, really from the existing Bay Street up to 64th Street to the north. And really largely encompassing the environs of Bay Street currently, and as it proposes to expand northward to Site B, the Powell Street Bridge underpass environments, the Hyatt Hotel, and up through the public market. I'm going to go back here. The point here is that we recognize this area is changing in Emeryville. We recognize there's new housing units that are brought in. We recognize the great number of folks that are shopping at both the public market and Bay Street, at future other development sites in this district. And how might one be able to walk from one to the other? How might a resident who lives in this neighborhood, be able to go out for a walk in the evening? And how is this really start to be defined as this great shopping district, largely and primarily directed towards regional retail? It's an important function here, but also respecting the fact that those folks need to be able to walk, that there's a greater identity to be gained, and the fact that there's greater number of residential dwellers in this area that just want to go out for a walk. And those folks attended our community meeting and said the same thing. So major developments being public market, Bay Street, the plan really recognizes the great contributions that these public environments are making, saying, yes, this is great, let's expand this, let's draw from the best of this and bring that out into the public realm. Certainly as other properties begin to develop and change over time, we want them to reflect this level of quality and perhaps even more. The general plan has been, I think, a great background document for this study. It certainly paved the way for kind of this level of concepts and really primed the community to start thinking a little differently about their public environment and about the town. The general plan is saying, you know, many of the same things that this plan is doing, and we've taken these sorts of ideas of walkability from the specificity of the dimension and the clear space to walk down the street, to the level of activity, the kind of planted environment, the sense of place. These things are then distilled and made more specific to the Shellmound district and Shellmound Street. So let's take a little look at the existing conditions and remind ourselves why we're doing this. If there was any doubt, this is the new bus stop after the building had been demolished. This is the new bus stop there in front of the temporary police station as you approach Powell Street. The sidewalk then really sort of stops, and you kind of wander across the Powell Street Bridge underpass environment to get over to the other side. How might we be able to rebuild sidewalks so in a continuous fashion, not be interrupted by driveways and by these sorts of curb cuts? How can we establish quality transit facilities and appropriate waiting areas in order to encourage that use? How might we better treat this environment, both in terms of its character, the quality, the kinds of activities that can occur here, and very importantly, how do we connect from Shellmound Street all the way to the back here and to the pedestrian overpass? There's a set of stairs that drops down as you cross over from the tracks if you're heading west from Hollis. You have to get through this environment between the fencing in the underpass and the hotel parking lot. How can we turn this into a real robust and clear pedestrian environment? We'll show concepts associated with that. Here in front of the Woodfin Hotel, the sidewalk's about 5, maybe 6 feet, and interrupted in a few spots by light poles and signs and things like that. We want to widen these sidewalks. We want to bring about a more robust pedestrian environment. Other areas farther to the north where cars are overhanging, there's trees that are crammed into this very small sidewalk. This is not the kind of environment that we want to continue with. So the guidelines then set out to address issues of sidewalks, the quality of the sidewalk, down, as well as the dimension of those sidewalks and the things that occur within them, to plazas and public spaces, be them within private property where we're not really regulating as much, to the public environment, the potential for plaza underneath the Powell Street Bridge. And finally, providing some guidance to facades, really not trying to prescribe or overly prescribe the private environment, but to say that the success of the public realm really does depend upon the interface with the private realm. And there are strategies that you can implement, and as buildings begin to develop, they can be implemented in a way that make a very successful public environment, be it an active use, be it transparency, be it locations of doorways, being it bringing those buildings up to the sidewalk. So some of the functional zones of the sidewalk, it's really broken it down. We get very scientific in the plan in terms of how the sidewalk is broken down. From the main pedestrian zone, which is that clear zone down the middle as an 8-foot clear zone, to the public amenity zone between the sidewalk and the curb where lights, street lights occur, benches, planting areas, these sorts of amenities, to the zone, what we call the frontage zone, and the interface between the sidewalk area and the front of the building. There's enough space for planter pots or displays being pulled outside of a building, to cafe tables and things like that. Different ways of encouraging retail, but activating and enlivening the public environment. It's interesting, we have a number of Walnut Creek examples here, which is another destination retail environment. So these strategies are familiar to us from a retail perspective, but also from pretty good town building environments as well. More detail about the pedestrian zones in terms of maximizing the amount of clear space, making sure that there's a clear zone to be able to move through the sidewalk. Interesting things happening on both sides of you, to the public amenity zone where the planter pots are and tree plantings, etc. This is an example from Bay Street. To that frontage zone where there's just enough space for cafe tables, etc. The plan identifies strategies for paving using enhanced paving and colored concrete, something that might tie into the new paving at the public market, and creating an attractive and legible, cohesive environment for the pedestrian. There's strategies also to implement special textures and elements of art within the paving as an element that is repeated along the street corridor, something that might tell the story of ecology or the history of the town engraved into the paving. Street furnishings are not fully determined as part of this plan, but instead it's a quality bar that has been set, and these are, in some cases, borrow from the city's standard standard street furnishings. In some cases, it's an expansion, and some new ones that are identified that are of a little higher quality and make this district perhaps just a little bit more unique. If this is a more higher quality retail environment, maybe we don't use the most basic streetscape bench that might be appropriate in other parts of the city. This also recognizes that there's publicly provided furnishings and amenities, but also privately provided furnishings and amenities, such as the elements of art, the signage, tables and chairs like what we have at Public Market, to the planter pots from Bay Street. The idea that these are very compatible with the public realm and are encouraged to help activate the public realm. Transit stops are identified in particular. There's exciting examples from other cities in downtown Portland on the right to a more standard fare. This is in Palo Alto, and Emeryville has its own standards and different art components to those. Bicycle facilities as well along the street corridor in terms of parking and the lanes that are already on the street. Planting, this is an area that's still encouraged, but there's definitely been some modifications in order to better recognize the constraints to planting trees in the ground along Shellmound. But a strong street tree canopy is still encouraged. Public art, this area has been strengthened in the plan, the idea of incorporating both really interesting and iconic sculptural elements that are an attraction unto themselves is kind of one strategy. Another strategy, such as been implemented in Syracuse, is functional elements, benches, tree grates, paving, these sorts of things that need to occur anyway along the street corridor, but can be done so by an artist or in collaboration with an artist. As the example here, it's a landscape architect and an artist that teamed up to create this sort of scene. This may not be our aesthetic, but it's a good example for how this city might move forward. To other sorts of things that start to lend themselves to some of these specific environments along the Shellmound Street. The underpass area, one of these, and unfortunately I don't, actually this is an example in Toronto on the left. This is a dynamic light show that the sound and the vibration on the bridge translates to a light pattern on the underside. One creative example. There's a great example of murals from Florida, but our local here, city of Richmond, and the John Worley murals in that city are another great way to enliven these sorts of spaces and are encouraged by the plan. I'm going to show just a little bit more example diving into the Powell Street Bridge underpass area. So focusing in here from the existing condition to really what's proposed. And somewhere here there was a, let's see, oh yeah, there we go. I have to use this like somebody said how I should best do this, right? Here we go. So what's proposed, the black dots are the existing columns. So there's essentially two bays that move through. We've identified one of these bays to be at about 22 feet wide, to be an entire pedestrian zone passage all the way to the back where the stairs touch down from the pedestrian overpass, and all the way out to the street. You'll also see that the sidewalk is connected completely across, and that any vehicle access that moves through here does so by a normal driveway type of a treatment, as opposed to the curbs that are installed currently. We recognize that Bay Street may really require and benefit from vehicular access through this area, and the plan says that that actually can be a good thing. that these sorts of environments are not well populated. There's not that many people that are moving through here. And the idea of allowing this amount of activation of cars just moving in and out of the retail space is actually a really good thing of bringing more people, more eyes, and more activation. I think that it helps fund this and claims this space just a little bit more so that we can start to do some really fun things. The idea of treating the entire bridge as a mural and as an art piece. This could be a commissioned element where you solicit ideas and you select one, you move forward with an artist to really transform the character of the bridge. And I think, as somebody had said, the bridge is really this division within the district. The idea that it could really be the center and the unifying element of the Shellmound district. This also starts to show the pedestrian lighting treatments that we can start to place along that walkway. This is a car in the foreground in the drive aisle and a pedestrian bicyclist in the background in the pedestrian walkway. So then the kinds of activities that we can begin to create, the kind of environment from dynamic lighting shows. This could be a space for markets. There's all sorts of examples throughout our country for interesting things that happen. This is an example from Boston. This is another example, Florida. This one, I believe, happens to be Portugal. This was a pretty exciting moment in our last public meeting when we started to talk about these things. People really gravitated towards these ideas. The illustrative plans that are in the appendix of the document show a potential outcome. So if these guidelines were applied in a certain way, it might start to look something like this. And I think, just a few highlights to point out are the continuous sidewalks where there are existing driveways, that these are continuous, where there's an existing curb cut. This just becomes a normal driveway on both sides of the street heading into the Hyatt as well. New entry plaza here at the Hyatt Hotel, a widened sidewalk, which I'll show in just a moment. The widened sidewalks all the way down along the frontage of Site B and on the west side of the street in front of the proposed Wells Fargo Hotel and any future conditions at the Four Points Hotel. In section, what that starts to look like, you have the front of a building, you have planter pots, you have an 8-foot pedestrian zone, overall 16-foot typical sidewalk treatment. Perhaps on the other side of the street, there's an adjacent plaza, but you're maintaining your public access along the street and allowing all the great things to happen on the private property in terms of the plaza. Focusing in just a little bit here in front of the Woodfin Hotel. So what was a 6-foot sidewalk is a entirely reconfigured frontage, which allows for a 12-foot sidewalk, street trees to be planted, entry plaza. This starts to show some of those special paving. Sherwin-Williams. This shows the relocated driveway here in order to minimize the number of curb cuts across the sidewalk and instead allowing that curb cut to happen in this location. We've reconfigured some of the parking in the front, still maintaining majority or the same amount of their existing parking, narrowing up their drive aisle and making some modifications to the curb. The idea of a pedestrian crossing was raised and something that we started taking a look at. I think there's still some feasibility to be worked out, but a couple different locations that may prove feasible. One could be in association with any exit here, and this would actually make a lot of sense because we have driveways in this underpass. We have folks coming across the pedestrian bridge. Could make some sense here. But it also makes some sense in this location. This is a little bit more midway between the two intersections. So these are a couple different options for how things might move forward in terms of adding a pedestrian mid-block crossing. We also looked more specifically I'm just going to keep going here. We also looked more specifically at an idea to bring in parallel parking. If this is a retail environment that starts to develop, perhaps it's a little bit more street front, Main Street kind of a retail environment. On-street parking perhaps could be added. So we tested this out in a pretty interesting configuration that minimizes the amount of setback that we would need. Obviously, if we wanted to add on-street parking, that 8 feet, we have to take it out of the private property. There's nothing within the street that we can claim and change into that other use. So this is more of a hybrid scheme, and I'm going to zoom into this. But it essentially adds the potential for on-street parking to be added from Shellmound Way all the way up to Christie on both sides of the street. And I'm going to go this way. So what this starts to look like, it starts to create these parking pods between street trees. The sidewalk is maintained at 8 feet. You have an 8-foot parking zone here. So instead of a 16-foot wide zone, which is what we'd shown in the overall plan, with an additional 2 feet, we could gain on-street parking. This may be something that a property owner would want to propose as part of their master development. What this starts to look like, it starts to break down something like this, which could be a pretty attractive environment. You start to finish the tree wells out with tree grates. This could be a great opportunity to introduce underground treatments that are beneficial to tree roots. You could introduce stormwater and green street sorts of treatments within these parking pods. There's some drainage patterns that change here. So there's some exciting streetscape opportunities with this sort of a feature. This also just starts to show more enhanced bikeway conditions with painted elements, as an option, because we're starting to introduce doors and cars to the street environment. And that wraps up my component. Michelle's going to give a little bit of forward thinking about how this plan goes forward.
Thank you. And I will just wrap up the discussion about how we hope to move forward with the plan. In the medium and long term, which is really what the plan addresses, we want to, as I noted at the beginning, address deficiencies in the pedestrian infrastructure in the project area. It would be applicable to design review applications. So again, we would have to be waiting for development projects to come forward for some of these improvements. However, there are some aspects of it that we think can be implemented through the capital improvement program, which the city will be starting to consider at the end of this year. And those would primarily relate to the sidewalk and landscaping improvements in front of Hyatt House, as well as because Hyatt House is unlikely to have any development project that would create a nexus with the widening of the sidewalk at this point. So it would really be incumbent on the city to pursue that. A pedestrian walkway under the Powell Street overpass, as well as landscaping upgrades, which I had mentioned earlier, which could be funded by the property owners. In the near term, this is actually more, excuse me, I misspoke, more to what had been presented and suggested by TMG at the community meeting, which is to define the area surrounding Powell Street Bridge as a unique destination. Now, this would not involve widening the sidewalks or making any of the major capital investments that are being contemplated by the plan, but what it would do would be to help to start to create that area as a focal point rather than a point that you just rush by. And I think by helping to create that, it will support the retail in the area, as well as support the further implementation of the plan and motivate property owners to consider redeveloping their properties once they see that the connections are stronger and it enlivens the area in general. So this would be primarily undertaken through an art program that we think could be done by a council task force that could consist of a couple members of the city council, perhaps the art committee, and property owners and tenants in the area. At the community meeting, TMG indicated that she thought that Denise Pinkston from TMG indicated that it would be great if the property owners would financially contribute to this near-term solution. So again, we think that's something that really can help to support and help to bring this project to implementation in the future. Other near-term actions that we can take throughout the plan, the streetscape section mentions that we will create an amendment to the existing city street furniture catalog, and that can be done in the near term to really start picking out those elements and to help guide future development for them in selecting both what they might want to do if they want to do it to a higher finish, but to create a context. And that's something that we can pursue in the near term if these guidelines are approved. And then the last thing that we want to pursue is evaluating access to Site B through a traffic study. And what this will help us do is it will help us evaluate exactly where we might put that pedestrian crossing, because we'd want it to work with the egress and ingress with the site. We do anticipate the area under Powell Street Bridge, but if they may need something in the mid-block crossing as well, somewhere mid-block between the Powell Street Bridge and Christie, that creates additional opportunities for us to implement that, that pedestrian crossing. And so with that, since I wanted to complete that, the environmental review, this is exempt from CEQA under the general rule. And our next steps are, assuming this is approved by the Planning Commission, that we would want to bring it to the City Council for their review and potential approval in July. So we would like to answer any questions of staff, if there are any at this point. And our recommendation is that you consider this any public testimony that you receive, and that based upon that, our recommendation is that the City Council, that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council that the Shellmound Design Guidelines be adopted, as well as amend the Emeryville Design Guidelines to stipulate that the Shellmound Design Guidelines would take precedent in the event of a conflict. So with that, I'm done and open to questions. So it's sort of looked at as two fronts. One is the concept that was put forth by TMG Partners, which is essentially improve. It would keep the infrastructure the same as it is. The sidewalks and all of that would remain, but pull out the landscaping that's there. It's a little dated, and create something that's a little softer and has a sort of a nicer interface, as well as implement some public art in the area, potentially the painting of the bridge, or if there were other sort of public art schemes that could be done. And that's something that could be done in the near term and could potentially be funded by the property owners. But the major capital improvements that we discussed, the widening of the sidewalk, the changing of the drive aisles, the relocation of the driveway entrance, would be medium or long term and probably contemplated as part of the capital improvement program. Yes. Well, the widening of the sidewalk would not, the way that the sidewalks are being anticipated to be widened would be back into the private property. So the curb line is not anticipated to change. But the relocation.
Circulation around the hotel, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Just one quick question. On page 11, which has a picture of Shellmound Street at Shellmound Way, there is a 6-foot sidewalk on the right and an 8-foot sidewalk on the left. Was there, what, I thought we were going for 8.
Well, the typical, what we hope to achieve throughout the area is a 16-foot wide sidewalk with 8-foot pedestrian clear. However, there are certain constraints in the area. If there are utility boxes or anything that is creating a difficult condition, the minimum is a 12-foot sidewalk with a 6-foot pedestrian clear. But that's only in specific cases where we have constraints, street lights, that sort of thing. Do you have something more to add, Josh?
Is showing in front of the Hyatt, where we can't make it any wider than that, or we would be encroaching too much into their parking.
I had a question concerning Site B. Has that been resolved as to what use Site B will eventually be? I see a seamless relationship between Bay Street, Site B, which is Bay Street continuation, and also the underpass.
At this point, Site B has not been, the specific planning for that site has not been set yet. Madison Marquette has been working with planning staff. They've given us a couple of different options, but they haven't settled on one in terms of putting forth an application or formalizing any of their site plans.
Big box type of site, or is it going to be a villagey continuation of Bay Street in character?
We don't know, but it's probably worth noting that with the demise of the redevelopment agency, that site is now the property of the city. We have an exclusive negotiating agreement with Madison Marquette for that site that expires in September, which is only in a few months from now. After that point, it could go to some other developer than Madison Marquette. It's up to the city and the oversight board, I guess, to decide who we're going to sell it to. They don't get to decide what goes there, but that will help to drive the price. I should also point out that whatever goes there is going to have to come to the Planning Commission for approval of a conditional use permit and design review. That, don't hold your breath though, that's not going to happen next month. Hopefully it'll happen within the next year.
So as far as the uses, potential uses for the underpass, are there any restrictions? Are they temporal uses, or could they be more long-term uses? What are the restrictions for usage underneath the Powell Street overpass?
Well, that's actually public area and its circulation. So I think the uses that John was discussing in here would be sort of temporary market uses, or as public event space if they wanted to, have concerts, that sort of thing. But it wouldn't be a use strictly in the sense of uses for planning purposes. It would be temporary use, but for the most part, it would be used for circulation.
That is technically public right-of-way. It's Powell Street. It's the area under the bridge, where Powell Street on grade used to be, and now there's a bridge over it, but it's still Powell Street public right-of-way. So whatever goes there would be governed by the same regulations that govern anything that happens in a city street. Probably require an encroachment permit or, some kind of a permit from the city. The city owns the property, and we would control what happens there.
Since in a development like in New York City under the Queensboro Bridge, they have a whole gourmet section, food section, consortium of uses underneath that bridge. That's a right-of-way as well, and there are permanent uses there, which are vibrating and beautiful and energizing for that area. Is that something we can't consider? They had the same right-of-way issue.
No, I think that's a legal question for the city.
See a lawyer.
Not sure if he's prepared to answer right now. It's somewhat speculative. That's New York State. This is California. The laws may be different. But typically, you don't grant a land use entitlement which runs with the land in perpetuity to something in the public right-of-way. It
Be a ground lease. It would be a ground lease, I'm sure.
Something like that. Public rights-of-way in California are governed by, I believe, by the Streets and Highways Code that may say what you can and can't do.
See it as a valuable piece of property which really ties the whole area together, not really as a bifurcation. More, I see a lot of potential in this. And have we considered maybe a competition, a design competition, where we can gather some of the best and brightest and select some of the best solutions for that area?
That's very much what we would anticipate for the certainly for the long-term use of that area. That would be what we've thought of, very much what John said, to really create it instead of something that divides the area, but to create it as a focal point.
And I know that you proposed some short-term, I guess it's short-term parking in front of the other hotel, which was just a hypothetical because you'd have to get some additional 2 feet from the property owner.
It's unlikely the on-street parking would be in front of the Hyatt Hotel, but it would be along Shellmound along Shellmound between Shellmound Way and Christie, or on the other side of that's on the west side, or on the east side between Powell and Christie, in front of Site B.
So instead of parking, have you given any thought to possibly parkettes or something to bring an outdoor cafe feel to that whole area on both sides?
You know, the way that the parallel parking is being contemplated, it really lends itself that if somebody wanted to convert some of those spaces to a parklet, it would work very well, because the idea is that there would be trees inset, and right now the vision is to park cars as a buffer between pedestrians and the road, but they're inset, they would be surrounded by landscaping, so it could certainly be an opportunity for that as well.
Thank you.
I have two questions. First, is it, I'm just wondering for comparison if you know what the existing sidewalk and kind of pedestrian zone width are at Bay Street?
In the center? Actually,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Say they're about 12 feet
Okay.
from face of door to curb, and in some cases they do widen out. There's some bulb outs and things.
Okay. And then my other question is, so you mentioned on the kind of more detailed plan on the blow up of the area underneath the Powell Street Bridge, there was a driveway to the hotel parking lot that was kind of eliminated onto Shellmound and relocated onto the new driveway under the bridge. And I'm just curious, you mentioned that that was done to kind of eliminate a conflict across the sidewalk on Shellmound. But by doing that, it's kind of created a conflict across that pedestrian area under the bridge. So I was just kind of curious if you considered the trade-offs there, because it seems like in that pedestrian area under the bridge that if you wanted to maintain it as a more usable area, you'd want to eliminate that driveway.
It's a great point where we're just trading the conflict from one place to another. I think to some degree, yes. I think we're also saying that we don't know exactly how the underpass area is going to develop, and so that may factor into it. There's one other factor, though, that I didn't mention, which is we gain additional parking spaces there by closing that driveway that we've lost in other places on the frontage, and we're trying to make this as beneficial to the Hyatt and their operations as possible. And so, that's something that we've strongly considered. You'll see a larger plaza space there opposite their front door, trying to encourage some sort of a walking connection between the sidewalk and their front door. So by gaining this, also just some of the other changes we've made, maybe we might even be gaining a parking space at the end of the day. So that was another key factor.
I'd also like to mention that it's true that you now have another place where cars are crossing a sidewalk under Powell Street as opposed to on Shellmound Street, but if you look at the pedestrian experience between Bay Street and the public market walking along Shellmound Street, it gives you one less driveway to cross. And also, from a traffic perspective, it consolidates two driveways on Shellmound Street into one driveway. So you only have one place where cars are coming and going off of Shellmound Street instead of two places that are right next to each other.
Any other questions for the,
So have all the
before I open
areas,
the public hearing?
I'm sorry, been studied for the underground utilities and conflicts, and are those clearly defined here?
We did do a survey of the area back in 2005, but we're mostly contemplating sidewalks, and sidewalks don't create. You can still access underground utilities.
I'm wondering, like the tree wells, and if like that's really doable, because I think like in the general plan we talk about Christie being a green street, I think.
Well, that really, in terms of the street trees and the plantings area sections, we've tried to be as sensitive as possible to conflicts that may exist, so that in events where there's issues with tree wells, we've indicated that plants in pots or alternative plantings can be considered if putting in trees are too costly. So, although these are, we show them as trees, they're for illustrative purposes in terms of what we hope to put in, but the guidelines themselves have enough flexibility to adapt if there are existing conditions that make the implementation too costly.
I have one other question. In the staff report on the first page, in the background, it talks about the project along Shellmound Street, including IKEA, and Hyatt House-based public market. So I've noticed in the guidelines themselves, so there's no mention whatsoever of Shellmound Street on the west side and south of Christie.
Yeah, so that sentence is just saying there's a lot of stuff on Shellmound Street in general. I probably should have just taken IKEA out, but it's, you know, it's another major retailer. But the guidelines themselves are specific to Christie to 64th. It doesn't actually address the what you call it, south of Christie.
Is that?
Largely because, you know, in terms of what's happening south of Christie, the development that is certainly on the west side of the street, Bay Street, is not going to be changing anytime soon.
The east side.
East side.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
East side.
East side, yes. Sorry, the east side is not going to be changing anytime soon. So really imposing the guidelines on there in the hope that there might be a nexus with the redevelopment is not going, you know, with the redevelopment of those properties is
I'm specifically
unlikely to
talking about
happen.
the west side, though.
I think
And there is the Courtyard Marriott down there, and I've seen people trying to get from here to there, and it's really tough. And so that seems like an area that needs to be addressed as well.
you know, we could always amend the guidelines to be to encompass a wider area. I think the goal of this was to look at really the concept of it really started with the area around Powell Street Bridge is really unpleasant, and we want to support these two retailers. And so initially we just actually addressed the Powell Street Bridge area, but then we really saw that we needed to make a connection. And the main focus has really been connecting Bay Street and the public market project. So, but it can certainly be expanded to the
Wouldn't
south.
be hard, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
If there's no more questions, this is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this item? Seeing no one, close the public hearing. Looks like you have a comment.
No, just bringing my microphone down. Well, I'd just like to say that it looks like they've incorporated the issues that had been brought up by particularly TMG at the last hearing. And since TMG hasn't shown up here, I presume it's acceptable to them.
We got an email from Denise Pinkston saying she supported these guidelines in their current form.
I have just a couple little comments. On the resolution on page 1, there's a typo,
Uh-oh. Don't like
and it's pretty important. Whereas the Emeryville design guidelines, I think you mean Shellmound. The second whereas.
No. No, that's referring to the citywide design guidelines,
Yes?
and which are called the Emeryville Design Guidelines. And it's saying that those guidelines allow specific and area plans or, you know, guidelines that are for specific sub-areas of the city to take precedence over the Emeryville design guidelines, over the citywide design guidelines. So that's what that's
Okay,
referring to.
well, they both say Emeryville design guidelines, so it's taking precedence over itself. That's all. I don't know.
Second whereas, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's not worded very well, but what it means is the citywide design guidelines provide for specific and area plans that are tailored to the unique areas of the cities and that would take precedence over the citywide design guidelines if there are conflicts. That's what that's trying to say.
Still don't get it, but I believe you. I had a couple other comments, if I may. There's a few little language things, simple little fixes on page 2 of the Shellmound guidelines. Oh, wait a minute, that's not right. I mislabeled that. No, that's okay. Page 23, I'm sorry. Page 23. There's just the principle is awkwardly stated. It's a little it could be better, that the public street life shall be supported by the public streetscape. And I had a question on that same page, under guidelines 2.6.1.2, at a district scale, coordinated design, type, color, and material of street furniture contributes, blah, blah, blah. Who's going to oversee the choosing of the public furniture? Would that come before us as different projects are developed, or?
I think that's a next step. I don't know, do you want to speak to that, Michelle?
Of the streetscape furnishings for the Shellmound design guidelines, if you go to page 26, the implementation recommendation, which is what I had mentioned, is something that we could do in the near term, is to develop a detailed streetscape furnishings catalog for this area. We could certainly bring it to the Planning Commission. The existing street furniture catalog, I don't believe it was approved by the City Council, but for whatever reason, it didn't come to the Planning Commission. But I certainly see no reason why we couldn't and really should bring it to the Planning Commission in the future. The way that the catalog is set up currently, I believe you received a digital copy of it prior to the meeting, is there's one for the whole city, and there's a subsection currently that addresses the Park Avenue area. And so this would be another subsection that would specifically refer to Shellmound.
I forwarded a link to the street catalog to all of you. Hopefully you all got it.
The old one. Is that
Current one.
current one? Yes. Okay.
Oh, the current one and the 1993
Yeah, okay.
thing, which is a different
Right.
issue.
Right.
Right.
And then I just had a couple little more. On page 25, we need a better picture of a tree grate, because it's actually illustrating the very thing in the text we don't want to do, which is a girdled tree.
Yes.
And on page 30, under the,
Something in here.
at the very top of the page, it talks about trees in the compatibility with the physical conditions of the urban setting, such as limited space for roots, canopies, yada, yada, yada. I would like to also add maybe a little note asking that successful tree species in the area are noted and follow suit, and that sort of ties in with 2.8.1.0, which is 2.8.1.9, which is plant selection. So I think you almost have the language there. And then the last thing is on this page is the shrubs, which is down at 2.8.1.12. It says should be trimmed to 3 feet or less in height, and I would recommend actually citing from the Bay Friendly Guidelines, which we're working towards and on, is to use appropriate species of shrubs that grow to 3 feet or less, and then if they grow higher, that would be maintained to 3 foot, and that would keep down the maintenance cost. And that is, there's a little, yeah, I very much, I'm not really sure about page, let's see, on page 35. Where are we here? I'm just questioning the driveway underneath the overpass that goes into Site B. So I have reservations about that. We just have to see the project as it comes before us, but it does create conflicts, as Commissioner Moss stated, with the pedestrian access under the bridge. And on page 44, which is the enlargement plans, there was a, I got really confused. There's this, it says retail proposed and other development schemes shall front and have primary access from Shellmound Ave. And I was like, oh no, is there a new street that's happening? You know, like Bay Street, but it's just Shellmound Street, I'm guessing. So that was it.
You have comments, John?
Starting with the acknowledgements at the beginning, the bottom says redevelopment agency. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but seems outdated. And then starting off, beginning of chapter 1 overview, kind of a general question on the formatting. I was a little confused how this is going to be put together. I'm assuming it's going to be a spiral bound, double-sided things facing each other. And maybe that's what I was struggling with a little bit, where the first page, which is a map kind of graphic illustration before chapter 1 overview, I opened the document up and it's like, what is this? And it wasn't really clear as to what that was. And I think, yeah. And I think, just in general terms, what would improve things is if we put better titles on the illustrations. I think the illustrations are really great, but I don't know what context they are. So I think I struggled with that a little bit. Then continuing on, kind of formatting item again, is page numbers. And I'm not sure if my photocopy faded off on the top because I didn't see consistent page numbers or page numbers, and maybe it's where they're stapled in the corner and I'm just not seeing it. But then going on to page 7, chapter 2, there's a statement that says a walkable district is defined by a high level of safety, a concentration of amenities, and active uses in buildings that reinforce and encourage pedestrian activity along the street corridor. I would like to add one more clause in there after concentration of amenities that says adequate sidewalk widths. And I know that this is what this whole thing is about, but it seems to escape us a lot. And then probably the biggest issue I have with the whole document is that we no longer have a clearly defined number that says, in absolute terms, we want 8-foot sidewalks. And that's really relating to the pedestrian zone that I'm speaking of. We've given a range that says kind of a 6-foot, or a 12-foot to 16-foot, and then we talk about having 50% of the overall width being the pedestrian zone width. So because we've given that range of 12-foot at the low end, I think we've really left an open door to invite a 6-foot sidewalk, which I'm totally opposed to. So what I'd like to see is some sort of a statement that says we are going to have a minimum of 8-foot pedestrian zone. And I think in the case where we're in front of the Hyatt, where we only have 12-foot to play with, I think we still have to make that 8-foot pedestrian zone. To me, the 6-foot just isn't acceptable and isn't workable, especially in a high-traffic area like that. So I think there needs to be wording that accommodates that. And really the exception is that when you have the obstacles like the traffic signals or something that you can't move, that it could narrow down to 6 foot. And I think the wording in there that kind of says that is pretty decent. Let's see here. Yeah, just general term for all the illustrations, if we can add some better titles that better describe what's going on there. And
I'm sorry, John, are you referring to the illustrative plans at the end or the?
These are kind of in the middle of page 11.
Oh, okay, those, okay.
Yeah, typical street sections. And I'm just, it doesn't flow very well. I don't really understand if there's something that better described what this is supposed to be showing me, I think would be helpful. And then just a general term, I saw the term downtown kind of a couple places, and I don't really know that downtown is appropriate. It's probably a cut and paste kind of thing. But I would recommend that like we do a search and replace on downtown maybe put Shellmound District or whatever, something that, because I'm not sure that we really have a downtown. And then Vanessa brought up the conflicts underneath the Powell Street Bridge, and I totally agree with that. I'm really concerned about creating the street there, and I can see how that could definitely bring some life to underneath. But given the size of the columns and where they're situated on the street, to me it almost looks like a literal accident waiting to happen there. I just can't see how that can function, and maybe better traffic studies and something can convince me, but it just looks like a pretty dangerous area for both pedestrians and the cars coming out of there. And one final comment, and that kind of relates to two of the pages at the end, the illustrations. There's a dash line on vision diagram, and it shows, I thought I saw it. I'm sorry, I had notes that I thought I had seen it. There's a dash line coming from the transit center, basically, and I thought there was some definition to that line. But what I'd really like to see is that continue and show that somehow the pedestrian path continues through this and makes its way through our new path that was just put in at the south end of the marketplace in front of Urban Outfitters. That shows the connection that eventually wants to get to Christie. And I think that's a really important thing that we have to show a really clear intention of getting from here to there. And those are my comments. But the having a definitive statement of we are going to have 8-foot sidewalks, especially because this document trumps the design guidelines that have the actual numbers in there. I think that's essential, especially for me to approve this plan. I would have to have that in there.
So I'm clear, by 8-foot sidewalks, you mean a minimum 8-foot pedestrian clear?
Correct,
Right?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What you said, with certain exceptions for signals or something of that sort?
Yeah, there's a clause in there that says, if it's not possible because we've got a traffic signal box or something like that. It's like, it shouldn't, I don't want it to be totally inflexible that prohibits.
Well, can I refer you to section 2.222, page 13, 222, which refers to that, and let me know if you think that language is not explicit enough.
I think that is where it says, but never less than 6 feet at specific constrained locations such as utility box.
Right.
I think that's great.
Okay.
So, but the overall, I think we really need to have a hard fixed number that says 8 feet is what we want to achieve for our pedestrian zone.
Okay.
I think part of the problem is that there is, on the previous page, section 222 is talking about the alternative of street parking with an 8-foot pedestrian and 8-foot parking lane, and the previous illustration has a 7.5-foot minimum called out. So that's inconsistent.
And I guess on page 11, there should be a big utility box where it says 6-foot minimum.
Physical obstruction, I guess.
If I understand correctly, I believe what Commissioner Sherman is saying is that where, due to physical constraints, the overall sidewalk width has to be 12 feet, you would still have an 8-foot minimum pedestrian zone, meaning
Correct.
that your, whatever it's called, the frontage zone, the amenity zone would be 4 feet,
Correct.
and there'd be no frontage zone.
Okay.
Well, I find it odd that 2 of the items on the agenda tonight were on my first meeting 6 years ago. My first study session and the last item. So I've been a part of all of the meetings that you brought us, Michelle. And I don't really have any more comments than what my fellow commissioners have said, other than the underpass driveway that shows two-way could work sort of like between West Elm and Elephant Bar, where there's a pretty wide sidewalk, and then I think you can go in one way there. Is that true? Or you can come, that's two-way there. It's probably a lot wider. But maybe if this was looked at it as a one-way, again, we're looking at whatever this development is. If this becomes a huge shopping area, or even a 1 or 2 story multi, what did you call it, Stephen? An urban village. One way in isn't going to work, and one way out, which is really all there is right now at Christie, unless we start sticking aprons in all the way down the road, or even one. So there's going to have to be ways in and out, and this seems to be at least a very good option that's hidden. Maybe it doesn't lend well to the pedestrian crossings, but I'm sure there's a way that maybe that could be a raised area where it slows traffic down and lights come on, and then everyone flows across the street, assuming that Wells Fargo gets built and maybe another restaurant goes in. There's more activity across the street. Hyatt does better than the previous owners, and we get a lot more people going in, and then what TMG is doing down the street. So I don't think that's a bad area to at least have cars passing, and I agree with the consultant that it increases more like literal traffic under there, whether it's pedestrian and car. You want activity under there, because the less activity, the point is it's dark, it's unused. Now we want activity, so maybe one way would work. And that's really my only comment. Otherwise, it's a good document, formatting aside. But maybe we'll see what that looks like in a final.
I'm just assuming that anything that happens with that proposed traffic underneath the bridge would be studied further, because I think there are problems with circulation, with turning into the driveway and the stacking distance and all that kind of stuff. So I'm assuming that if that is looked at further, that there'll be, real serious study done. And, I think it's a nice idea if it can be made to work safely and efficiently in that. My one little addition to this is on page 19, one of my pet things, the parking structures could be lined with ground floor retail. I think it said the parking structures should be lined with ground floor active uses. And, whether it's residential or retail, I don't care, but should rather than could. And that's all I'm going to say about this one. I think we've got a lot of good stuff in here, and that we should move forward.
Yeah, you actually, you took one of my comments with the should instead of, or could instead of should, or, you know what I meant. You know what I meant, that last comment I was gonna make. So I second that. And I also want to echo what Commissioner Sherman was saying with the, about the widths and the minimum. I was a little concerned about the 6 foot minimum as well, so I think that language just needs to be strengthened, so that we don't end up with that where it's where it's possible to have wider sidewalks. And then I have 2 other substantial comments and 1 piddly comment. So my piddly comment is that on page 19, planning at the bottom of the page, Planning Commission should be capitalized. And then my other 2 comments are on page, whoops, now I lost it. It's the part that talks about there it is on page 16. 2.3.2 talks about with proportions and the option for on-street parking. And I was just a little concerned there because I think there's a drastic difference between a essentially attached sidewalk with on-street parking and an essentially detached sidewalk with, with planting and amenities and things between the pedestrian zone and the curb. And so I just would like to see either kind of a minimum ratio or a maximum ratio of parking that would be allowed. It says right now that basically that zone would serve as a hybrid area for parking and amenities. But I think if that's going to happen, that there should be a maximum ratio of parking to amenities, so that we don't end up with a majority of parking in a zone that's really more intended for pedestrian amenities and public amenities. Either that, or there should just be some additional standards for that condition where there would be on-street parking. I think you want to address that.
I clarify something. Do you mean that in terms of the width or along a length of a block?
Along the length of a block.
Okay.
Like, maybe it's 60-40 or something like that. That there would be 40% kind of pedestrian amenities in that zone or something to that extent.
I think the intent is that that balance happens throughout. There's never a place where it's all parking, no amenity. So is your comment that hybrid should only occur within a certain percentage of a block, so that you would have a full 16-foot normal
Well, no, but that
condition?
if there's going to be a hybrid approach, if there's going to be parking included, that the parking should only occupy so much of that zone for that area where the parking's included. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And then my last comment is just that I was a little disappointed to see that I know this plan only deals with the public right-of-way, but I was a little disappointed to see that it didn't address at all the connection to the Bay Trail through the, Sheraton Four Points parking lot that connects to Shellmound there. It's just really shown as kind of the existing driveway and the existing condition, and I think that's a really kind of a weak link in the Bay Trail. And I just would have liked to have seen that addressed a little bit more, in that short area where it does touch the public right-of-way.
Maybe we could get a little clarification on that, because that had been something that the plan did address, and it was my recollection is that was changed when the Bay Trail was determined to follow Christie over to Shellmound, and I'm kind of looking at Charlie because I'm.
Right.
And so I think, there could be an interim condition where we maintain and strengthen the connection through the parking lot adjacent to Powell Street Bridge and making the connection.
Something, because right now part of Christie is only one way, and so you can't, if you're going north on the Bay Trail, you can't.
However,
It would involve a contraflow bike lane.
Okay.
Right.
We were contemplating where Christie comes out to Shellmound Street. There's 5 lanes that all go the same direction. It really doesn't need 5 lanes.
Yeah.
So there's room there for a contraflow bike lane on one side and a normal flow bike lane on the other side. And I think we were contemplating something like that along Christie to get rid of this funky connection behind the Hyatt. It's true that is currently the official Bay Trail alignment as far as the Bay Trail people are concerned. So we'd have to go to them and plead with them to change the alignment over to Christie. I believe this was something that came up when we were considering combining the Powell Street urban design guidelines, which, as you know, have been adopted by the City Council some time ago now, with these guidelines, which started earlier but somehow got delayed, into a single overall comprehensive plan for the whole area. Well, that ended up not happening, And I think that was when we were contemplating that we started thinking about what was happening along Christie Avenue there. I'm afraid I guess that's kind of fallen through the cracks now, but that's why it's not reflected in this plan.
Okay, yeah, I mean, even if it ends up being on Christie, I think that even touches this plan area, so I just think that's something that should be addressed in this plan.
The ultimate idea in the general plan is that the Bay Trail would go along a new bike path that would be built parallel to the freeway, just east of the freeway, south of Powell Street, behind the current Powell Street Shopping Center when that area all redevelops. And then it would come out to Shellmound Street just north of Temescal Creek, and then cross Shellmound Street and then go across the bridge over the railroad tracks if we ever build it, and then down the Greenway. So that's the alignment the general plan calls for someday for the Bay Trail.
So we should address it in its current form. I think it's a good comment.
The problem with it here is you can't turn left on a bicycle going northbound on Shellmound Street into that driveway. Well, I guess you can, but it's not easy. So perhaps that would be something we'd look at if we ever put in this mid-block crosswalk.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that needs to be addressed because it's even more difficult to turn left onto the one-way Christie, so your only option is through the Sheraton parking lot.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a lot of comments here. Is there a motion on this?
With all the changes, assuming staff has taken good notes, I would move to approve the plan as proposed with the changes.
I'll second
Sending that on to City Council, correct? Yes.
For approval, right, for adoption, yeah.
For adoption.
So, Michelle, are you clear on all their revisions? Good, okay.
Does that include the recommendation that it be expanded to include the west side of Shellmound north of where it
That would
currently
be
goes?
every single comment made. I agree with Commissioner Coomerly that, yeah, just that sidewalk, at least the pedestrian realm, is an important part to this plan. It is a lot of accumulation at the Emeryville round there and a difficult intersection to cross, but
Where are we talking about?
No, for the west side of Shellmound, south of Christie. The public right-of-way in that
To
area.
how far?
To the bridge. Well, all right, not to the bridge. To
the
where
bus
the
stop?
sidewalk stops. How's that? At least to
to
the
meet this plan.
to the Marriott, Courtyard Marriott. And
Well-
if there is another crosswalk further along, then to that.
One thing I should point out is that these guidelines will take precedence over the citywide design guidelines in the area that they cover. In the area they don't cover, and no other special area plan covers, then the citywide design guidelines will take precedent. And the citywide design guidelines in this area, which is regional retail overlay, call for an 18-foot sidewalk. So if the Powell Street Plaza area ever redevelops, it would be subject to the citywide design guidelines along Shellmound Street, and they'd have to do an 18-foot sidewalk, which is more than what these guidelines call for. So you might want to
Right.
consider
Rescind
not
my-
including that
Strike
area.
that.
Ask of that. Never mind.
Anyway,
Thanks, Charlie.
Sure. Happy to help.
so not really amending my motion except to strike that one want.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Okay.
All right.
Commissioner Flores moved and Commissioner Cardoza seconded.
On
To
the
recommend with all those adjustments that this be forwarded to the council for its approval.
On the motion, Commissioner Cardoza,
Aye.
Commissioner Coomerly,
Aye.
Commissioner Moss,
Aye.
Commissioner Sherman,
Aye.
Commissioner Steinberg,
Aye.
Vice Chair Flores,
Yes.
Chair Donaldson.
Okay.
7 ayes. The resolution's approved to forward this to the City Council with a recommendation for adoption.
I have to recuse myself for this item because I did the first meeting too, because I live within 500 feet at the bakery lofts.
Within 500 feet?
I did.
Okay.
And, but since I live there, I can still sit in the audience, and I won't go anywhere because I know we're going somewhere after that.
Okay,
Can we take a little break here?
okay. 5-minute break.
Yeah.
5-minute break. And I would like to thank you for all your patience of sitting through these other items. So. All right, back in session. Miru, this is your item.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Donaldson and Commission members. This is a amendment to a previously approved landscape plan at 1051 45th Street. In terms of just background, in August of 2006, the Commission approved a use permit and design review to convert storage and laundry area in an existing single-family unit to accommodate a new second unit. The site also included an existing dwelling unit in a separate building behind the main unit, bringing the total number of units on the property to 3. The new unit triggered a parking requirement of 1 parking space that was provided along the eastern property line. The approval of the new unit included approval of a landscape plan, and that was constructed sometime around June 2007. Since then, the applicant has made revisions to the landscaping on the property without prior approvals from the city. A notice of violation was sent to the property owner on April of this year. The applicant is now proposing legalization of work that has already been done and some additional changes to the landscaping on the property. So this was the original approved landscape plan back in 2006. So the colors are, so this is 45th Street. This is the main unit. This is where the new unit on the first floor was accommodated, and that's what the permit was for. And this is the third unit behind where no work was done as part of the use permit. There was and is a single car garage, and that went with the existing parking that was there. And then as part of the new unit for which the use permit was approved, parking space was approved on the sidewalk along the eastern property here. As part of that, what you see in light gray, these are wheel strips going into the garage, as well wheel strips going to for the second parking space. The colors in purple are sidewalks or landing pads for the staircases. So this is essentially what was under concrete in the original landscape plan. Most of the area that you see in thatch was ground cover lawn. You had some shrubs on the site along here, as well as along here, as well as along here. Now, this is the proposed landscape plan, which includes both legalization of work already done, as well as a few new things. What you see in red star is, and I'll explain each star in a minute, but the red stars are areas where the work has already been done, and the applicant is proposing to legalize that. Where you see the blue dots, those are things where the applicant is now proposing changes. So let's start in the front yard. If you remember, these were wheel strips going into the driveway, and you had vegetative area here. This is now poured concrete. Similarly, around here, these are brick pavers, and this area is covered with crushed rock. In addition to that, you also have the crushed rock going all the way down. Moving on, this was supposed to be ground cover. This is now, you have planters, and you have area which is for tenants' gardens. Now in the backyard, this is where the major change has taken place. This portion right here was poured concrete on. You have these checkers tiles in here and in here. In addition, this area along the western property line was also poured with concrete. So that is about what the elements of legalization that are being proposed here. What new in terms of what they want to do further is the area around here. They want to put pots as well as crushed rock in between. In addition to that, they want to cover this area here with crushed rock as well. This area currently is just dirt, and they're proposing mulch to be covered here. In addition to that, they are also proposing a fence along their western property line. The front yard, about the first 17 feet, the height of the fence, the wood fence would be 3 feet, and the remainder would be 6 feet. Just to show you some pictures, so you have an idea of what we are talking about. So this is the front yard. So you have concrete that was poured here, as well as this was converted into pavers, as well as crushed stone. What else? So this is the front yard. This is a closer look of what was done to the wheel strips and vegetative. This is kind of tells you what is underneath the crushed rock. These are plastic sheets, which are not quite pervious. This is, again, we are still in the front yard towards the western property line. So this is a staircase going up, and this is the lawn area, and this is the neighboring property's driveway. And where they are proposing the fence is along here. This is now moving to the western side of the property. This would be the tenants' gardens, and you have some planters here. This is the checkerboard tiles that they're already in there, and they're asking for this to be legalized. This is the area which is under dirt, and they want to cover this with mulch. Sorry. Okay. And it's not going further down. What's going on? It's thinking. And here we go. So this is along the western property line. Again, this is area that was poured with concrete, which they're asking to be legalized. And they have put pots along here. Okay. I have no idea what is going on. Okay. So a review of any landscape plan looks at the usability, aesthetics, as well as stormwater regulations. The city's stormwater ordinance requires for project sites under 10,000 square feet, which the site is, best management practices need to be implemented for sites smaller than 10,000. And this includes design measures to reduce water quality impacts, that is, reducing impervious surfaces to vegetative areas. As such, there is no prescribed percentage of the site area that needs to be treated for stormwater. However, the ordinance does direct reduction of impervious areas where possible and directing it to runoff to vegetative areas. Keeping this in mind, what staff is recommending is that instead of places where they are using crushed rock, for example, along the rear property line, along the perimeter of the rear property line, we are recommending that they instead installed a drought-resistant, shade-friendly shrubs and ground cover, and that the roof drain is directed to this vegetative area. Also installing drought-resistant, bay-friendly plants and shrubs along the western property line instead of putting bark mulch. This is the area which is under dirt right now. And all fabric that is used for weed control be perforated weed control fabric with something called weed block, and no solid sheets of impervious plastic should be on property. We are not recommending approval of the proposed fence. We believe that these sites are small, and the fence would create artificial blocks, and aesthetically would not be appropriate for this area. That about concludes my presentation, and before you ask if you have questions, I want to direct your attention to a bunch of comment letters that we have received. You have seen all of them via email, and some of them were in your packet. And then I've put all of them together on the dais. The first two are two letters from neighbors. One is Cecilia Mariscal, and other is Ron Clark. These were received today. You would also find two letters from Mark Lemaire and two letters from Cindy Van Empel, as well as a petition submitted by Mr. Lemaire as well as a letter from the applicant. Some of these were also in your packet itself. So if you have any questions, the applicant is here, as well as two of the neighbors who wrote the letters, Mr. Lamar and Ms. Empel. Hopefully I'm saying that right. So if you have questions for me, I'll be happy to answer. Otherwise, the applicants are here.
I have a question for you. It's my understanding that you or someone in the planning department granted them an exception for more concrete than they were supposed to have at the time it was originally poured. Is that correct?
Well, let me see if I can go back.
They did it without permit, but you
Yes.
you waived the condition, or you allowed it?
That is not how I would characterize it. At the time when the original landscape plan was approved, most of it was there except for where they had poured concrete and, where did it go? Okay, it's not that. Let me just get to, yeah, this is on the rear western property line, and maybe it's better if you see it in a site plan.
So it's the rear side yard?
Yes. It's a portion right here, or it's this portion.
But it goes to, okay.
Yeah, it's only this portion.
But now it
Which-
goes all the way to the fence or something?
I'm sorry?
Does it go all the way to the fence or
No, it doesn't go. There's still space here. There's still space here. And what they're proposing is crushed rock along the perimeter. And what we are recommending is that this entire area be with drought-resistant shady, because this doesn't get too much sunlight.
So Maru, could you go over that again and show where you are recommending something different from this plan?
Okay. So all along the perimeter, they are proposing crushed rock underneath weed control fabric, and we are recommending drought-resistant shady shrubs and ground cover. Along here, which is dirt right now, they are proposing mulch, and we are proposing drought-resistant bay-friendly land shrubs and ground cover. And in addition to that, those are the two main things that we're recommending. And of course, we're not recommending the fence.
I think we're not recommending the fence, and also wherever there's crushed rock that has solid sheets of impervious plastic under it, that would be replaced with the weed control fabric.
Correct.
And what about the last blue dot on the bottom?
This one, right here?
Yeah.
Right now, it is dirt. It needed, in the original approved plan, it was going to be ground cover. What they're proposing is pots, terracotta pots, and in between you have crushed rock.
But that's a wheel strip where that,
Well, this is the wheel strip, and one of the reasons they don't want ground cover here is because they feel that when people are stepping out of the car, they step into the vegetation. So instead of that, at this little corner right here, you have some pots and you have crushed rock.
you can't exactly open your car door on a pot either.
Yeah.
You can't kill a pot, but you can kill ground cover. I think that's the logic they're using.
I think the pot would probably be spaced such that it would
So
be
that,
between
yeah.
where you would open the car door would open between the pots, most likely.
Anyway, so, okay. All right, are there any other questions for Maru?
Can you tell us how many off-street parking spaces are required on this property?
2.
Even though they're 3 units?
Yes, because when at the time when the use permit was approved, there was a one-car garage, and it was grandfathered in. So only parking for the new unit, which was one-bedroom unit, it triggered only one additional parking space for the new unit for which the use permit was approved, and that was provided along here.
There's there's a provision in the zoning ordinance that says that any use that's in the medium-density residential zone that was there legally before 1988 is deemed conforming. So if there's 2 units and they only have 1 parking space, that's conforming.
And so the driveways do not count as parking.
No, parking in the front yard is not permitted by a zoning regulation.
Oh,
So
okay.
so it needs to be outside the front yard, so which is here.
Okay.
Even
is
though
why you
they
have the
do
wheel
park
strips
there,
going.
it doesn't count.
I see. Okay. And then I have a couple other questions. So I seem to remember you showed us a slide that showed the driveway for the property next door, and it looked like it had new pavers. I seem to remember like a Hollywood Drive that used to be there, similar to what was on the subject property. Is that right? Did it is that a new driveway?
Oh, that driveway is associated with the neighboring.
Right.
Right.
But is that I'm wondering if that driveway is new, because I remember like a Hollywood Drive there.
I believe it is relatively new. Mr. Lemaire is here.
Yes, it was installed last year.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Hollywood Drive before that for
Yeah.
45 years.
Okay.
If you're going to be speaking, you're going to have to
All right.
come up to the microphone.
And then
Wheel strips, maybe?
my last question is, I was wondering if several of the communications we received referred to a concrete buyback program which doesn't exist anymore, and I was hoping you could give us some information on what that was when it did exist.
Essentially, it was funded through the redevelopment agency funds. So property owners could request the city for grants to reduce, if they had concrete driveways, then the city would grant them grants to change the concrete driveways into wheel strips or landscaping. And if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Lemaire, the new driveway was built as part of the of this program.
Question?
Is there a minimum requirement for open space on this lot? And is there a minimum requirement for landscaped open space on this lot?
No, we don't as yet have those requirements, but our new zoning update that we are working on will be having that.
What would that be?
Well, for single family and 2 families, in the proposed zoning, there will be no open space requirement. The open space presumably would be accommodated by the required front, rear, and side setback areas, yard areas. For 3 units and more, what are we proposing? 50 square feet
Yeah.
per unit, I think, and a combination of common and private open space. I don't remember all the details. But
So what they've built would clearly exceed the future minimum requirements.
oh yeah, I think so. Right.
Thank you.
And you're referring to open space as opposed to landscape space. You could
Both.
have a patio, deck, whatever. Yeah.
Open and landscape.
Yeah.
Are there other questions for Miru? Okay. I have one question. The slide that was shown with the paved area between the 2 buildings looked like it had a lot of tables, tricycles, barbecue stuff. Do you know can you speak to how that area is being used now?
This picture was taken sometime in May. I took that picture around, early May. And that's what I found. It was being, you saw the tables and the chairs. Nobody was using it at that time, but,
That moment.
It's the tenants.
The
use that
right.
presumably for recreation and
And that's
gathering or whatever.
right. And that's the reason that the applicant has given for doing that,
Okay.
for providing space for barbecue and children to play.
Does the applicant wish to say anything or come up and speak?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
What I want to say is that
You have to be close to the microphone, too.
All I want to say about this is like, they're saying that we put the cement in front of the driveway without city's permission. That's not true. On May 2011, we went to the city, and when we went to the planning department, the building, the lady in the front told us, because it's such a small space, it's in between the two wheel strips, that we do not need a permit. So we went ahead and we put a washout. It's not a plain cement, it's like a washout. So we went ahead and put that in there, and when we were doing it, actually, Miss Templeton came to see, because a neighbor had called Miss Templeton. So she came over and she looked at it, and she just said, it looks good. And that's about, she took her pictures, and we never heard anything about a front yard till May 2012, about not maintaining or whatever. I forgot what the thing it said, but then we went again to see Miss Desai and Miss Templeton, and we met them on May 4th. And when we went over there, no discussion was about a front yard, that it looked fine. Discussion was about the backyard. So we had taken the picture of a backyard, which was a disaster. It looked horrible, and we wanted to change at this point. My husband and went and got some stepping stones that you see that were planted on there, put in there. He went over there and put those, hadn't started putting all of them. So we went in there, we told them why we want that, because we want a barbecue space for all the tenants to have it there, and the kids, where the kids can play and ride their bike without getting the wheels, in muddy, or their feet getting muddy, and they can go in and out of the house. And we wanted them to have a garden, which was our problem, because original plan, we did not provide any space for tenants to have a garden. So they had already put their, you saw, the picture that you saw, that they have already put the planters in. So we wanted to leave that there for them, because today we went there, the garden is, they have tomatoes and they've got everything in there. The garden is, I think our daughter took a picture, so if you want to, we can pass it on to you. It looks great. Mm-hmm. And we saw the kids playing with the ball, and they have a little kid with a bike, and they were barbecuing before we came here. We just wanted to see how it looks. And we did not just do that checkered on our own. We went and talked to Ms. Desai and Ms. Templeton, and they both asked us what our plan is, so we told them what we are going to do. Ms. Templeton recommended don't do one color, just do checkered. It'll look way better. And they said that you can do that, whatever your plan, but make sure you give us in writing and give us a picture now. And then once you're done, do it again. So May 9th, we took the letter, what we are going to do, along with the pictures, how it looked, and then we started. We did not start doing anything till after we spoke to them and after we had presented the letter. And that's when we had gotten this checkered. And we got the letter again to stop the work right there, and we haven't gone there since doing anything. We've been there, but didn't do anything. So that's all what I wanted you to know, that we did not just
do anything without
permission.
So do you have the pictures of what it currently looks like?
Yeah, a daughter took it.
It's on my phone, though.
Oh, okay.
She just right when we stopped.
Email it to us.
Well, I can.
Sure.
We might be able to project it. We can give it a try.
This is gonna be good.
We got an app for that.
Yeah.
Much better. God, who can tell?
Is that squash?
Oh, it
Tomatoes are
zooms.
growing.
Wow. Okay.
Okay.
Wow.
See, that's the
There's
garden
the
that they're
retina
growing.
display for you.
God.
Okay, I can see it. No, I can.
No, that's
I
okay.
can see it.
We can,
The flowers that are on the side are
What side is that?
This is the front yard, as you're walking up toward the gate to get to the back, so the wheel strips are there, to the right of the wheel strips, basically.
Gotcha.
I think there is a photo. So somebody was asking the question about where the where we wanted, or what was on that side next to the wheel strip. So this is the dirt that's there now. This is I'm looking onto the street, so as if you're coming up the wheel strip. So you see the problem there, that if you park your car on the wheel strips, first it's very hard to get your car completely onto those wheel strips. this is a Toyota Corolla, which obviously missed its mark a little bit. But when you're getting out, you end up getting out onto that dirt instead of being able to have a walkway either back and around to the walkway to the back or to the front house. So I think what I would say is that we are not trying to make our house ugly. I mean, this house has been in our family since 1978. I was born in that house. We love that house. You know, we want to make it look nice. The original plan that we did in 2006, it just did not work. It was just not practical. It looked horrible. It wasn't functional, and we're just trying to make something that will look nice, that will improve our property value, obviously, and make it comfortable, make it functional for tenants.
I lived in Emeryville since 1973. And, you know, we bought the house, you know, we like.
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
You have to be closer. You can, either that or the one that's in front of you.
I came here in 73 and lived here in Emeryville. I like that area, you know, so I bought the house. My 3 kids born here, you know. I would never even dare think, you know, to degrade the property value, you know. And I'm doing everything I can do to, you know, with the permission.
Maru, there was reference to photographs that were taken before of how it looked when, in April or May, when the first letters were going back and forth. Is that something that's in a record somewhere?
You mean how it looked before?
Yeah.
I got something.
Oh, you have
Or
that?
any, when it was ruining?
When it was ruined?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll show you the
So,
pictures.
can we zoom out? So here's a photo of the backyard space, the space between the 2 different units. There's a couple problems you can see here. One is the leaves from Mr. Lemaire's property fall onto the dirt there, and so nothing really grows. I think they're eucalyptus leaves, and so whatever they do to the soil, the grass would grow there. It's also a very shady area between the house and the fence, so sunlight really doesn't hit it. So nothing was growing. The other thing is there was no walkway. There was that patch of cement along the side of the house, but there was no pathway to actually get there. So people were just basically going back and forth over that ground cover, and it killed it. And then this one is one of our tenants. So before it was just completely ground cover, essentially between the 2 units, which gave people nowhere to sit outside. The only thing that was outside was just walkways. And so one of the tenants actually made her own deck without us knowing over the grass. So that killed the grass, gave her an area to sit, and then of course we had to rip it up and everything was dead underneath. But I understand why they wanted it. And then that one, it's kind of hard to see.
They wanted to do their own garden where we are asking for the tenant's garden. They went ahead and picked up, you know, the plants that we put in. On top of that, they put their own dirt, which the level was brought up above the sidewalk. I think you can see better on this picture. That all the dirt was coming, you know, onto the sidewalk. And I have, not only have this, I have the letters that I can show you from 2007 to 11, that what we have done, what we have asked for them to, you know, landscaping is like a shared thing. It's between tenant and us. So it's both of our responsibility that how we can make it work, but it just did not work. So we are asking for something that we did not provide them before, which is like the barbecue area, the space in between, place for the kids to play. I mean, kids are kids, so they need space to grow. So we just did not provide them with that, which is, part of that is our fault for not doing that. And we are asking to have that. We are also asking to provide them with a place where they can garden, which we did not provide them before. I think these days everybody wants to grow their own stuff and, you know, have their own veggies and stuff from home. And we want to encourage that, and that's another reason why we are asking for this to be changed.
Any other questions for the applicant? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, I'm sorry, I do have one question. I forgot. Well, it's actually it's an applicant or staff question, but I'm hoping somebody can tell me so the area that's proposed for the tenant's garden, if I understand it, kind of is existing as the tenant's garden, and I'm just curious, underneath the containers, the beds that are there, what is it concrete underneath, or what is underneath?
dirt.
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 And I think this, I don't know if you saw this picture. We'll show you. This is the garden,
That was the start of the garden.
start of the garden. That now you see the things grown in there. So that's, this was taken way back when they had just planted it.
Oh, sorry, you have to, yeah.
This is when they
Repeat.
had just planted it, the seeds. So we took it then, it was in May. And so this is the garden, and this is where we put the checkered, and this is where now the dirt is, where we want to put some plants and the bark, which we see that staff is recommending to just have the plants, not the bark, and we are okay with that. This is on the side where we were asking to have the, on this side, where we had the ground cover which died. And now we are asking for the crushed rock, which we see that they are recommending to have plants and ground cover, which we can try. We can put ice plants and see if they'll live. They're pretty hardy, so hopefully they'll live. Or I'll go to Home Depot and find out what will live in the shade. We'll just plant that. Yeah, this is where you can see the bike and the toys and the stuff where they've already started. This is taken the second day after we planted when they told us can't do it anymore. You can see the bike and you can see the toys and you can see their barbecue table that they've already started using the space. And actually today, the tenant, when we went in there, they said this was the best thing that we ever did to their yard. Gave them some space of their own.
And the concrete space on the side of the west side of the back one-story unit?
That one was in 2007 when we got the final approval. It was already there. Mr. Sai can tell you that.
Okay. Can you talk about the fence you want to put in front?
Oh, yeah. I just want to show you this picture. If you look at this picture, you can see that the tenants, this is the window of our tenant. Few reasons for their privacy and for their safety. For the privacy is because this street, 45th, it runs quite a bit. People walk back and forth on there. And when you have your window open or your curtains pulled up, visibility, especially at night when the lights are out, you can easily see through. And it's very unsafe to leave the windows open at night, and even in summertime, because again, for the visibility. The third reason we are asking is you see that our neighbor, Mr. Lamar's car, right in front of their bedroom window, it's parked over there. So when it's less than 4 feet distance in there. When you get out of the car, you're stepping away from that. So you're not even 4 feet, you're less than, I'd say about 3 feet, 2.5 or 3 feet from the window, their bedroom window. And the noise from the engine, the headlights turning on, the radio off or on or maybe not on, all those things count. So when you're at night, when you're coming into, I'm not accusing him or I'm not saying anything, why did he park there? It's his driveway, he has the right to park in there. Well, I'm asking for our tenants' privacy and their safety and have a fence all the way up to where this thing ends, or maybe by the windows, where the windows end, the end window. Same as on the other side. And in front on the other side, there's a 3-foot fence which was installed by the city, actually, this one. This one was put in by the city in June 2009, and I have the letter that I can show you when our neighbor in 1049 45th Street sent us a letter for getting our approval because we had a fence there from 2006 permit. So they want to take that down and put this one in there instead. And so we okayed that, and that's why it was put in. So we are asking for the same thing on the other side to match both to be the same. And that's all we are asking about the fence and the reason behind it.
Okay. And is the, underneath the crushed rock in the middle of the drive strips, is that all plastic under there?
Yes, it is. It has, but it's got holes in it. We put the holes inside. But, I mean, if you're recommending, we can change it with the weed material, whatever you say. That we didn't know. But that we did not know. I mean, we didn't know. We went to the store. That's what they said. to control the weeds. This is what we do. That's what we did.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. No other questions. This is a public hearing, so unless you have anything else that you want to say at the moment?
Will we have a chance to respond to what public
Yeah.
comments there are after?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So it's a public hearing. Public hearing is open. You're welcome to come up and speak. We have 3-minute limits on this public speaking.
In this case, since it's a rather complex thing, could they be given a longer time if necessary?
If necessary. Well,
Thank you, and good evening. I got it. Good evening, Chair and Planning Commission. I'm Cindy Van Empel, 1053 45th Street. I live there part-time, Friday through Monday. The staff report as presented in your packet does not actually adequately characterize the issues associated with the approval of the use permit and development review, nor with the current review of the prior approvals. I'll let Mark speak to that at some detail. Increasing impervious surface, and this has increased the impervious surface on the site and as compared to your prior approval in 2006. Increasing impervious surface increases stormwater runoff, decreases groundwater recharge, increases erosion where the water reaches the exposed soil, increases noise, and increases heat, especially overnight. Pavement absorbs heat and releases it overnight. We've seen that in a lot of places. It's called the urban heat island effect. I'll get into that a little bit more in a moment, but in the meantime, the staff report doesn't very well, unfortunately, doesn't adequately identify city policies. The resolution states that the current proposal is consistent with the Emeryville general plan, but one of the 2 letters that I prepared for you, I spent the better part of Sunday going through the general plan and the Emeryville design guidelines and the general plan EIR, and I highlighted certain points. There's 5 pages easily of policies with which this current proposal is in conflict. In particular, the NPDES permit, and I'll direct you to the general plan EIR at page 3.5-15. It states in that permit that there's a condition on it to implement site design landscape characteristics as feasible, which maximize infiltration where appropriate, provide retention or detention, slow runoff, and minimize impervious land coverage. I'm not really seeing how this is minimizing. I'm seeing it maximizing, or certainly increasing the impervious coverage. Many of the general plan policies are based upon that NPDES permit condition. And you can see that there, as you look at the EIR, obviously the EIR sets forth a certain, you need to observe these ideas and ideals, and then the policies stem from that. It talks about, various policies talk about, sorry, I've got a number of pages here, implementing on-site stormwater management, minimizing or eliminating runoff, bay-friendly landscaping. These are items, these are issues that you've discussed all night long. And I've been very pleased to hear that. I would hope that you would apply those same standards to all development in the city, not just to new development. Noise is a significant concern. I don't know if you're aware of this, but Mark is a recording engineer. He records classical music primarily. There's my 3 minutes. Adding impervious surface increases the noise environment in the area. It's noise reflective. That pavement's also adjacent to the bedroom, which increases the noise environment at the bedroom. It increases the heat overnight in the bedroom. And I'll be brief. The fence is another issue, of course. You saw from the photographs and as the applicant stated, there's no room to open the door. We have to step onto the grass or certainly open the door over the adjacent property to use the cars. The house that Mark lives in, the house that Mark lives in has an overhang, and then there's a sort of there's like a little tuck under piece where the basement is. And that makes it impossible to move over the additional 3 feet in order to then be able to access the driver's side of the car. If a fence goes in there, frankly, there's a prescriptive easement where that door swings. If that fence goes in, it removes the prescriptive easement and the driveway is no longer usable. So that's obviously a large issue. I would certainly ask that you reject this particular application. You have a number of options here. That you can revoke the use permit for the 3rd unit. due to a failure to comply with the approved conditions, conditions to which Mr. Kular put his name. You can enforce the approved conditions, including the landscaping, maintenance, and irrigation, and you can approve a revised plan. The staff report doesn't really indicate any particular reason why the prior approval should be set aside. Mr. Kular doesn't really spend much time maintaining that property, and I note that his tenants have demonstrated their interest in having landscaping. If you go to the property and look in the front yard, and if you look at I know they're allowed to do this, so if you look at the detached sidewalk strip around the street tree, they've planted plants there, they've planted them in front of the building. The prior tenants, Mr. Collard put jade plants there that died because they weren't actually being irrigated. And they planted some plants in pots and then hand irrigated all of it. The current tenants hand irrigate. I think the back garden has a hose, but all the front is irrigated by hand. They are in fact interested in seeing some sort of landscape on the property. You know, I have to wonder, when you've spent so much time and effort adopting a new general plan, going to tremendous effort and time, and as you mentioned in the various resolutions of approval or resolutions of appreciation for Planning Commissioner Flores and for Planner Diamond, years have gone into the development of these policies. I would hope that you'd stand behind these policies now once they are adopted. Thank you. I'm sorry for going over.
Okay.
I rehearsed this so it would fit exactly into 3 minutes, but let's see. Oh, okay. So I did a colorized thing. It really helps a little bit in my picture. This is what you folks all approved in 2006.
Could you please speak closer to the
Oh, my
microphone? You can
apologies. Here, I'll
pick
use
one up,
this.
or you can just
This
use
is,
that.
It's on.
Hi.
Should
Is this
be on.
working?
I think so.
Okay.
Is the light on?
There's a little light on there. This is what you wanted in 2006. I just colored it in green so it was most obvious. And the light blue is the area that was permitted as sidewalk and stuff. So today, the same property looks like this. All of the red there is various concrete blocks, poured concrete. This area here along the edge is the proposed crushed rock. And these wheel strips are all filled in with various sort of hardscape. So the thing I want to point out here is that the city has had legal problems with Mr. Kular since 2006. He was pouring the unpermitted concrete. Mr. Tsai pointed out this area, but this area also here was poured at the same time and apparently was granted an exception. This was before any tenants showed up and made it difficult to keep things maintained. He was pouring concrete before they even moved in. This warning letter, which came out in April, is just the latest example of the warnings that Mr. Kular has received over the years. The city has warned him repeatedly to stop paving his property, but he doesn't take the warnings seriously. And the reason why is, I think, because the city warns, but they've taken no action. None of these illegal concrete installations. A week after receiving this letter to cease and desist, he's in violation. 240 square feet of concrete block went in here and here. This is like 2 days after Mr. Tsai, we all received a letter asking for public input. He just came and put them in. That Monday, 2 days later, was when Mr. Tsai came out and took photographs. And she said, the fact that he's just installed this makes no difference at all. He doesn't have permission to put them in, and it won't, anyway, but the point is nobody has asked him to remove it. He pretends in his letters that his tenants have requested these changes. These tenants are my friends. Not one of them have requested the changes. This little strip of grass, which we've discussed, is adjacent to my driveway, and it's 4 feet wide. I have mowed that and maintained it for 14 years. And Mr. Kular has been requesting my neighbors, the ones that live at those windows we talked about, he's been literally badgering them to sign a piece of paper last week saying that they request a fence there. They don't want it. When I first knocked on their door and asked them if they wanted that fence, they didn't know what I was talking about. There's my 3 minutes. They don't want it. If there was a fence there, as we've said, we couldn't use the driveway. Emeryville just installed that driveway a year ago, and it's been there as a Hollywood driveway for 45 years before that, I think. Anyway, the point I want to point out is, even though there's a lovely family presentation here, Mr. Kullar is the only one, except for his wife occasionally, who shows up. He's really an absentee landlord. He shows up every few months to kill the plants. The garden that was described as the tenant's garden, Mr. Kullar allows nothing to be planted there. The pots are there because it's barren ground, and Mr. Kullar has made his tenants promise in writing that when they leave, they'll have to remove that and the planter boxes. I don't know what he has in mind for the land after that, but I imagine it's more pavement. Mr. Kullar wants crushed stone to replace vegetation all around here, and planning recommends bay-friendly plantings, which I appreciate that. Mr. Kullar has no history of putting in any of the plantings that were originally agreed upon in the original. None of these ground cover things actually went in. And this area here that was cement block that went in, he talks about making it so that the kids don't have to play in the dirt. He killed that whole land area in March with Roundup. The tenants who were maintaining that land and mowing it, and their kids were playing on it, they suddenly said, "What's going on?" I could hear them telling their kids, "Don't touch the grass." And they were guessing, since it was springtime and everything else was in bloom, that something had happened, and Mr. Kullar did tell them later that he had killed it. This is why it was dusty and dirty. Then he started putting in the blocks. Then Maru sent this violation letter, and they had a meeting with Nancy Templeton, who's not here tonight, but has not, she said she was going to be here, but she had a job interview this morning this afternoon in Hayward. Anyway, she said that she came and looked at this stuff. She wants to categorically let you know that she did not approve it. It was not okay with her. She actually is a little concerned that planning has not done anything to stop this from happening. She's not sure she understands. When I spoke with her a few weeks ago or a month ago, she referred to throwing up her hands. She said it. She didn't know why planning was not stopping this. But I ask you to please stop it. I don't want to live next to a pavement-covered parking lot. And I imagine that since there's no plan to irrigate this property around the edges, that it'll all be pavement soon, since he's installed pavement without permission for years. Mr. Kullar doesn't like plants. He wants them to go away. He wants to be able to clean his property and maintain it with a broom. And basically, he's never planted any of this stuff. He does have tenants that want that garden. The area next to the rear house, and I'll only take you up one more second. Here we are. This area that was poured concrete in 2007, I know that there was a garden there, and a thriving garden, before the current tenants. And over here, where there's permitted sidewalk, but over here next to it, there's a lot more poured concrete that Mr. Kullar installed in January. The current tenant, who is sort of the king of the garden, wanted to plant plantings there. He asked Mr. Kullar if he could put in plantings there, and Mr. Kullar said no, and poured the concrete. So what we have here is somebody who's in violation. I don't believe he signed this contract with the city in good faith to do this landscaping back in 2006. He's demonstrated that he has no plans to maintain landscaping, and he's been pulling it out and killing it since he started. So I would please revert to your original concept, which is this. I kind of like it. It's cool. It's mostly green. Good property management will help here. It was never properly maintained. And, oh, one last thing. I hope you do ask me questions. Most of the photographs that they showed you of how terrible the property looked was taken about 2 years ago. That property looks a lot better now, and he had no reason to kill the lawn, which was perfectly healthy. The decking with the termites, that was 2 years ago, not current photos. Okay, thank you very much. If you have any questions, please.
Excuse me, one question. the windows on the lower floor unit facing your driveway,
Yes, yes.
most of them have frosted glass, is that correct?
Yes, 2 out of 3 of them have frosted glass. The current tenants, the rear window, the last one, does not have frosted glass. When I asked them if they wanted a fence, they said absolutely not. But they have been asking Mr. Kurlar repeatedly to install frosted glass because that's their bedroom window. They say they feel perfectly safe in this neighborhood. They've never felt unsafe. By the way, when I pull in my driveway there's an automatic light that comes on. Anybody who goes into that driveway at night, and it doesn't happen, the light comes on. They say they feel fine here. They don't want a fence. They think it would make the place dark.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone, do you wish to respond?
April 11th, if you could just look at the April 11th, and I highlighted in pink, where he says that we do not allow the tenants to garden. In pink, it says this is the notice that was given. That they can plant on the ground. April 11th.
Do you have a copy we could have for the?
Can I see a copy?
I had only
I
one.
can show you the April 11th letter.
I guess I can't see. Okay.
Yes. We need a copy of everything. We need a copy of everything you gave the commission for the record.
Oh.
What?
This is my last one.
Okay.
With the pink and
Thank you.
in April 11th.
Here. I'll look at it.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Okay, we have the cop.
And then the photo I wanted to show is what he was talking about, the lawn that was killed with the Roundup. There was no lawn there. This is what had happened to the lawn. It was all weeds that were killed with the Roundup. So that's a photo of it. And we did have an irrigation system set up. You can actually see the sprinklers right there. There's another sprinkler set by the rear house. There was a sprinkler system set up for the front yard as well. That was according to the guidelines that the Planning Commission gave us in 2006. All of the irrigation system basically was broken. The front yard system was broken by cars driving over it and people walking on it. And then the backyard one, I don't know if it was kids with their bikes going over the sprinklers and breaking them, but basically they all broke. Oh, well. In response to other things, one is, again, I think Mr. Lemaire is portraying it as us going off and doing all these things by ourselves and trying to be the boss of the city of Emeryville. And, I mean, that's not the case at all. I just want to reiterate that we don't know what channels things have to go through. We tried to go through City Hall or asking whoever was there, and when we were told that it was okay, that they were small changes and they didn't have to go to the Planning Commission, we accepted that. I mean, if we knew that it had to come here, we would have brought it here. We never tried to do things without anybody knowing. I guess what I would say about his response about what tenants want and what tenants feel, all I can say is they've told us different things, and if people aren't here, then it's hard for us to say what they really wanted. The other thing I want to say is, again, like I said, we've been in this house since 1978. We've never had problems with the city before this. You can look through the records. We've never come before you guys. We've never had any issues with anybody before. We never had any issues with our neighbor on the other side. And then Mr. Lemaire is saying that he wants to revert back to the 2006 plan. What I would say is we tried that plan and it didn't work. And what do you do? I mean, if you try something and it doesn't work, the solution can't be then to say, well, this is what was in writing. We have to stick with that. We can't change it. I think we have to look at what problems happen and then say, okay, these are the problems. What can we do to fix it so that the house looks better for us, for our tenants, and for everybody on that street? So that's what I would say.
I think I can do that, you know. He said that I don't come here that often. I think I'm going to give him a log for a whole year. So every day, every time I call, I'll call him and tell him that I'm coming. That way he would know it.
Can I ask one question about these letters that you've just given us? So in the on this first letter from September 2007, on the 1, 2, 3, 4, in the fifth paragraph it says.
Can we take the letters?
We don't have the letters.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You want that one?
Which page?
The very first page, fifth paragraph. It says, "Fourth, you should not be parking your motorcycle on the grass on the pathway to the barbecue area." So I'm curious, what in 2007, what was the barbecue area? What area was being used?
That was the area of cement on the side of the rear house that had already been approved with the original plan. So that was not done without prior approval.
Okay.
Where is that on the original plan? Yeah. Really, I don't quite understand.
I think this, for some reason, it's not on here, but there was cement put in here, and Ms. Desai came and looked at it, and then they approved. They said, okay, this path, and we explained the reasons for it, that this back house wanted to have a barbecue. They said it was okay.
Okay.
Charlie, yes?
No, that was Mr. Lemire who was making noises.
Okay, what I'm, okay, do you have any other comments? Nope, that's not, okay. I'm going to allow one more comment because, one more response, and then we will close the public hearing.
There are only two things. Mr. Kular had mentioned that they had never had any problem with the city, but back in 2007, they got an original permit for renovating the front house, putting in that third unit underneath. But he wanted paying double permit fees because he extended and started renovating his back house too without permission. I didn't phone in that complaint. I didn't even know about it, but I found out just recently that he did wind up paying double fees for that. So. And also, he had wound up in court with one of his previous tenants, but I don't have a lot of details about that. So I'm going to back away from that. The question I had that made me want to jump up and ask was, the barbecue area was what? I couldn't see it because it wasn't.
It was the area to the west of the existing one-story building in the back.
Right. The area to the west there was the area that Maru, it was poured, it was not on the original plans, as you can plainly see. When he poured that concrete, and he also illegally poured the concrete to the rear of the front house, Maru came out and did give the extension that you mentioned, Mr. Cardoza. I was there. I overheard her talking about it. So I just wanted to point out those two areas comprise about 320 square feet of concrete that was poured right then and there. I'd also like to point out that the Kulars have made it quite clear that they feel the original plan didn't work, and that the tenants broke the irrigation system and stuff. But I'd like to point out that it's their responsibility to make it work, and that they didn't. That they didn't even put in the original plantings that were requested. And they didn't maintain the irrigation system. I know that takes time and effort to maintain it, but they never did. It never really functioned. And that's why there aren't any plants there, or that's why they started taking them out. And once again, the photograph that we showed you of the backyard before they put in the checkerboard pattern, that's not a current photograph. The photograph that was taken, the way that lawn looked just before they killed it, he was mowing it. The tenant was mowing it, and the kids were playing on it. It was a lovely little piece of grass. Didn't look like that. It was lovely. So, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Discussion.
I don't even know where to begin. There have been so many rules broken here that it's mind-boggling. I'm a little disappointed the city wasn't a little more forceful in the early days in granting these exceptions, and I don't know what can be done. You know, they have a new plan, and how can we even trust them to do that? Charlie, do you have any answers to how we can even guarantee that the new plan would be carried out? I mean, can you remove their permission for the third unit at this point?
Well, you can revoke it, but that's a rather lengthy, onerous process. Maybe at this point, Michael, it might be a good idea to review the enforcement procedures.
So perhaps it would be better if I were to start with some options that the commission has tonight. So one option that you have, and if I miss anything, Charlie, please chime in. So one option is to accept the staff recommendation as presented. The second option is to accept that staff modification with any additional, or I'm sorry, accept the staff recommendation with any modification that you see fit. The third option is to reject the staff recommendation, and that essentially leaves you with the original use permit and design review that was approved back in '06. If that's the case, well, regardless of which option you decide to do, if enforcement becomes an issue, then the commission, the city has various options available to it. I'm not talking directly into the mic. So the zoning ordinance provides that in the case of if a use permit is not adhered to, that there are various enforcement mechanisms. One is that the city could institute an action to find that the condition in violation constitutes a public nuisance. That is a court proceeding where you would have to essentially go to court, present evidence to the judge that this was the standard, this was the violation that occurred, and as a result, the conditions as currently exist constitute a public nuisance, with the ultimate goal being that the court would then issue an order to the property owner requiring adherence to the conditions as had been approved, whether the original conditions or whatever modified conditions you may impose. Before we would get to that point, we would probably treat it as a code enforcement action, where we normally issue several letters advising the property owner that they're in violation of in this case, the use permit conditions of approval. Give them opportunities to correct the condition on their own, advise them of the potential penalties if they don't comply within a reasonable time, and then if voluntary compliance doesn't occur, then we would, one opportunity then again is to try to establish that this is a nuisance and get an abatement order from the court. Another possibility is to institute a revocation proceeding, which is also allowed by the municipal code. And the revocation proceeding would essentially find that as a result, the idea being that because the property owner had not complied with the requirements that were called for under the use permit, that you were going to revoke the use permit and design review that had originally been granted back in '06, and the property would essentially have to sort of go back to the condition that it was before. The revocation proceeding requires that the final decision be adopted by the City Council after a Planning Commission recommendation. So you would have to go through the process of having a public hearing, taking testimony, and eventually making a recommendation. That recommendation would be forwarded to the City Council for their further consideration and then final decision.
Wouldn't we go through the public nuisance process first before going through the revocation process?
Right. So these options, which I had just laid out for you, these are these are tools that you can choose. You can choose one or both. Generally speaking, though, you would want to probably, in this case, like most of our code enforcement matters, we try to get compliance from the property owner on a voluntary basis, right? So we would go through the process of issuing notices of violation. And in this case, there would probably be new notices of violation so that we can start with a clean record. And provide them ample opportunity to come into compliance with whatever the conditions are that the Planning Commission decides, and give them ample opportunity to do that. And then only proceed to those later steps of revocation proceedings or a public nuisance action if the attempts at getting voluntary compliance are not met with success. Generally speaking, for code enforcement matters, the city wants to be able to demonstrate to the ultimate decision makers, whether it be the city council or a judge, that they had tried to get compliance on a voluntary basis, and had worked hard to get, to do that, and that those administrative proceedings just had not worked out.
One more legal question. Does the variance that was granted to them during the original construction for an additional 400 and some odd square feet of concrete, is that not revocable?
Well, that has to be, I'd have to look a little bit more into that. I mean, right now, what your record has in front of you is the original conditions of approval. We have some letters, which indicate a notice, a notice of violation. If we were to go through, some sort of revocation proceeding, or if we got to the point where we were going to have to really put together some evidence to present either before, in an administrative hearing, then we would have to talk about, who said what, when, what kind of witnesses we have and documents. I can't tell you right now, based on what we have in front of us at tonight's meeting, whether or not whatever direction had been given by staff orally, and whether it was or not, I'm not sure. Whether that oral direction was necessarily evidence which can be applied towards a proceeding later on. So the short answer is I don't know. I can't really evaluate based on what I have right now whether or not whatever direction might have been given by staff to the property owner sticks.
So my thoughts on this, this is certainly messy. What I'm looking at is, I think that staff has made some good recommendations that I think are reasonable,
Could we get that picture up again that shows what was done, and so that we can see the areas that we're talking about?
You're talking about the one with the stars, the red stars and the blue dots?
Yep.
So I guess my feelings are I would like to go with staff recommendations. However, I'd also like to be sensitive to the neighbors and kind of try and do some sort of resolution to the front yard, the most visible part, the part that faces the street, which has really been pretty grossly paved over with all sorts of different materials. And I think that is pretty insensitive to the neighbors. At the same time, maybe if we could put this picture up. I went over to the site and looked at it, and there are problems. There are problems with the layout, the physical layout, where the strips are for the driveway. I don't know what the solution is, But what I would like to see, and maybe we can throw it open for some brainstorming, is to see if we can come up with some ideas that add a little bit more green to the front yard, and make it workable for the cars. If the top one, yeah. So if you can, move it so we get the full view of the two cars. Keep sliding it so we get the other way.
Down.
There we go.
View.
There we go. And that's better. Thank you. So you can kind of see the strips where the car on the left-hand side is. If you parked on the strips, it isn't functional. But yet I certainly don't want to get rid of any more green that's already there. So maybe a solution would be to make that more functional by perhaps getting rid of, perhaps putting gravel between the fence on the left-hand side and the drive strip, and then removing the gravel and putting in something that's green. I don't know. Maybe some of the landscape architects here could help out with some ideas. But what I'd like to achieve is basically, I think what the staff recommendation is for the backyard is reasonable. I think that allows something that's in place to stay in place, but it still adds greenery to the backyard. I do not believe that the fence is necessary or is a good idea, so I'm definitely against the fence. But I would like to figure out if we can do something with the front yard to make it better.
Well, I don't like anything. I'm trying to figure out what I mean, looking at the original plan, I think it's not a perfect plan, but it's not a bad plan. And I think, there were some opportunities missed and some design flaws that make some elements of it less than functional. But looking at the proposed plan, I think that is, it doesn't solve those problems in an effective way in my mind. So, for example, I think an opportunity that was missed in the original plan is to have a reasonably sized patio area between the two structures. I think that's a nice amenity that the tenants can use. But I think what's been proposed to kind of pave over that entire area is too extreme. So I would support something akin to something the size of the checkered pavers. I think the checkered pavers look nice. And I share Commissioner Sherman's concern about the front yard. That was my concern also. I mean, I think there's quite a difference between having 2 Hollywood drives with landscaping in between, and having basically a solid paved, I mean, it's not entirely concrete, but it's entirely paved surfaces, 2-car wide driveway. I think those are pretty drastically different, and so I would like to see the original plan altered in such a way to make it more usable. I understand the challenges of getting out of a car when you have such little pavement, but I think maybe if those wheel strips were expanded slightly or something, I will also look to our landscape architects for guidance on that. Did write down a couple other things. And I did want to add also that I would actually support if the applicant was amenable to this and willing to do this. I reviewed the zoning code, and we would actually be allowed to approve a parking exception, and I would actually support a parking exception to remove that the one additional parking space that was provided, and to just have the garage and the driveway, if it meant that additional landscaping could be provided in the front, because I think that would be much more attractive than having that parking space. I don't know, it seems unnecessary for the number of units to me. And then just lastly, and then lastly, I think also we should probably, in whatever action we do take, we probably should address the issue of irrigation of landscaping, because that seems to me to be, you know, a significant factor in why the landscaping may have failed. So I think if we could require drip irrigation or whatever, again, I'll defer to our landscape architects, whatever you think is appropriate to make that landscaping thrive, and that would, contribute to its what I want to say, health, while minimizing maintenance. I think that would be a positive step.
Yeah, I want to echo what Sean said. I like his comment about deleting or taking an exception on the second required parking spot. I like the recommendations that have been made by planning staff, and I think the deletion of the fence on the western side is a good one. I'd rather keep it open, but realizing that its absentee landlord won't be taking care of it, it's obvious that we need to do something that takes care of itself. So the irrigation's really important, as Sean pointed out, and low-maintenance landscaping is critical to this situation. Otherwise, it's just not going to look good over time, as has been indicated. It's looking a little better. The vegetable garden seems to look good, from what I can tell. And it looks like everybody's trying to cooperate. So I think if they make a few important modifications, which will help over the long term as far as maintenance, keeping it looking good, and I think it's really inherent in the landlord to really come there and keep it in good shape, or hire somebody who's professional. It's your asset. It's a quality piece of real estate, and it's a nice neighborhood. I think that would go a long way.
I have a few comments, as you might imagine. First of all, we can look at this picture here, and I am in favor of keeping 2 parking spaces, but maybe not 3, because we have the wheel strips going all the way back to the second doorway on the right there. But redoing the one where the silver car is on the east side, so that there can be a planting strip on the side. Obviously, people are parking where they ought to be parking, so that was a mistake, and that could be fixed. Certainly, the gravel needs to have wheat cloth fabric on it, not just perforated plastic. Also, I agree with staff in installing drought-resistant, shade-friendly shrubs along the west side of the property, as well as bark mulch, because actually you need to amend the soil. This is all bay-friendly practices. You need to amend the soil with compost and put plants and then mulch. So these are all things that are going to happen together. That's how plants grow around here. So in any event, certainly if the gravel is to be installed in the back of the existing one-story building, again with the landscape fabric and not plastic, I would prefer to see plants. I would prefer to see bay-friendly plants that improve the quality of the air, that improve the quality of life for the tenants, which obviously they really love plants. Unfortunately, on the east side of the property of the existing one-story building, the concrete has been poured almost up to the fence line, but there are vines you could plant along that fence as well, star jasmine, which was already along that side in the planting area, where the vegetable garden is. So obviously it grows there, so that's a possibility. I actually think that the patio area in the center makes perfect sense. It's a usable space. However, on the west side, there seems to be an issue with noise, and it's a possibility that you might want to put up some shrubs that do some higher screenage there and provide some sound barrier for the neighbors. I also agree with staff that the fence in the front doesn't make sense at all. And those are, oh, and I would like to put in I guess what would that be? A condition that, of course, you have to have a irrigation system that is maintained, and
I'm thinking about drip system.
that would be lovely. But I would like to see that, since this problem is, the original landscape plan was from '07, and here we are in '12, that's 5 years later, I'd like to see that the city checks this 6 months annually for 5 years to make sure that it's in good working order, because in 5 years, the landscape will be mature and everything will be fine, but it's two times a year checking. That's what I would, if you're, yeah.
So Vanessa, you're suggesting redoing the driveway wheel strips on the eastern drive?
Yes, and just up to the garage, and then landscaping in back with a path, so that there's more green in the front for the public.
Could you elaborate on that? How we do that?
Oh, if we're having
front?
2 parking spaces instead of 3 now.
There are not 3, because the front yard
Well,
doesn't
there's
count.
2, but there's these parkings.
Well,
The drive strips go all the way back along the side
Right.
of the house.
Legally, neither of the cars in this picture is parked legally.
Because
They're not supposed to be parked in the front setback area.
So they need
Front
to.
setback is everything in front of the house, basically.
Just to clarify, there's nothing illegal about parking there. It just doesn't count as a legal parking
Well,
space, right?
Yes, I guess, technically, right. But, so it's, legally, it's 2 parking spaces. One is inside the garage, behind that garage door, and the other one would be in front of where the silver car on the left is.
I see.
Where these 2 cars are parked are not in legal parking spaces.
The original plan called for a 24-inch box Mayten tree in that space between the 2 cars, and it appears it was never installed. But I think
You have to, if it was planted, you can come and tell us if it was planted, but you have to speak at a microphone.
It was planted. I think it was stolen, sadly.
Okay.
stolen, it was planted into the ground.
It disappeared.
It happens.
Well, if it's stolen, it needs to be replaced. It doesn't excuse you from not having the tree in the front yard.
Anyway, okay, we,
Replaced it twice. I replaced it twice, the tree. Both time was gone.
okay. Let's continue the discussion. Let's wrap it up. Okay, it sounds like there seems to be general consensus that in the backyard, there should be planting around the periphery, that vines would work on the west side, that there should be buffer planting in the place that says wood chips or mulch or something, drought tolerant, that there should be an irrigation system that's functioning, that would work, that would be checked periodically to make sure that it worked. And we're sort of now trying to come up with something on the front for the wheel strips. And there is this issue of encouraging people to park in the front setback is not what we want to do either, so.
So I kind of like the ideas that I heard about getting rid of the requirement for the second car and doing some real landscaping there.
So you take out that entire strip on the left-hand side.
I'd consider that.
I'd just like to point out to the commission that eliminating the requirement for the second parking space is not something you can do tonight. That would constitute a variance from the zoning ordinance, and that is not on your agenda tonight. We would have to notice that as a public hearing for a variance. And of course, I presume the applicant would have to request that. I'm not sure you can unilaterally make them take away a parking space. I don't know. Is that something they can do, Mike?
Let's see.
Well, whether we can or not, we can't do it tonight, so.
Keep talking about the other
Right,
issues.
we can't do it tonight, and I think I would be reluctant to do that tonight because there's 3 units with tenants in them, and I don't know what the parking situation is on street there, and removing a parking space is different from grandfathering a building that doesn't have a parking space, so that's my thought on that. But, so it seems that there's consensus that the fence is not gonna fly, that that's not a good idea. So we have a number of things that we seem to be agreeing on, and the remaining thing is what to do about this front piece.
May I make a suggestion?
Of course you can.
It would seem to me that the space between the wheel strips for each of these parking space and driveways areas doesn't need to be something that can be walked on. Because people aren't going to get out of the car in the space that's between the wheel strips, right? The car sits on top of that. So those could be ground cover or some kind of plant material with a weed block mesh, or well, actually, I guess you put the weed block mesh under gravel. But I'm a little perplexed as to why they filled in the space between the wheel strips in front of the garage door with concrete. And I would suggest that concrete be removed and that the gravel between the wheel strips and the other driveway be removed, and that both of those spaces between the wheel strips be replaced with some kind of low-maintenance ground cover, and then that on either side of those driveways you could have crushed rock or something that people can step out of their cars onto. That would at least add a little greenery
That's
in the
going
front.
the wheel strips on the east side are going to have to be realigned, or they're just going to park on the ground cover.
I'm not
What
sure
you
if-
see is what's going to happen.
I'm not sure if that's just a bad parking job or that maybe the wheel
No,
strips are
that's so
too
you
far
can
apart.
get out of the car.
No, I
mean,
understand,
the problem
but-
is we're trying to squeeze 3 units on a one, you know.
Right, it appears that perhaps
Garage
these wheel
house.
strips were put in a little too far apart.
It looks that way.
Yeah.
They
Well,
don't line up
They were
with.
put in too far east is what the problem is.
Ah, I see,
Can't get out of the driver's side.
right.
Okay, so we have gone through those other items in terms of the wheel strip landscaping. Is there, this is a straw poll, what do people think about the removal of the gravel, the realigning of the eastern wheel strips, and putting planting in there? With
And-
irrigation.
And what about some planting and irrigation in this space here, in the center?
That's where people get out of the car?
No, they don't. If they park on the drive tracks, there's still space. These 2 cars have pulled in. They're not on the drive track. Neither one of them is. You can see it doesn't line, the car on the right doesn't line up the garage door.
Is the garage usable, or is it occupied by living space or storage space? It's storage?
Well,
The people are parking in the garage.
it's got to be a legal garage because that's the
Yeah.
I
condition.
don't know what's legal here anymore, Buzz.
Well,
Nothing
it's-
has to be legal.
It's the legal parking space of the 2 parking spaces they require.
But how do we know they're actually parking in the garage? That's why I asked the question.
Well, we don't have enforcement.
They're not parking in the garage? Some people convert garages to living space illegally, so I'm asking the question. Okay.
Can I make a suggestion regarding the driveway? I just did a little sketch, but I think if we maybe thought about the driveway in the horizontally rather than vertically, I've seen some really nice examples of driveways that have kind of large, long concrete areas like this that provide enough. It's enough area, and then there's grass in between, and it provides enough area for the cars to drive up on, and it kind of would give you more width that you'd be able to get out of your car without stepping into anything. I've done a little sketch here which I can pass around, but I've seen some really nice examples of it. That I mean, it's kind of out of scale, but
There are papers that let grass grow in between them. Is that what you're referring to?
yeah, but just orienting it the other way because it provides. Yeah, I just think it might solve some problems. I don't know.
Yeah, let's put on the overlay.
Sure.
Are you a licensed architect?
No.
Not admissible, I'm sorry. Landscape architect?
You can explain this?
So the hatched area would be the grass, and the other area would be pavement.
This is going up to the garage door.
It's pavers,
So this is the curb
pavers
cut.
parallel to the sidewalk.
That's the curb cut.
That's the curb cut, right?
So is this grasscrete in here?
It could be grasscrete. I mean, what I've seen is a combination of, I've seen the long areas as concrete, and everything in between as grass.
You
And
just drive on the grass?
You drive over the grass, and hopefully the concrete's wide enough that your wheels park on the concrete.
Well, since they're really parking there, not in the garage, it's going to be getting oil dripping and everything else on it.
That's true. Thanks.
Well, part of the idea of having permeable paving in front is to collect that and have the plants filter it. So I would support an idea like that. There would need to be some structural elements in the actual drive aisles where the grass is, or else it's just going to become rutted, and that's a problem.
How is it irrigated?
That's all going to need to be irrigated as well, yeah, and probably with
Well,
pop-up spray.
If
This
a car's
requires
parked
more
there, you
landscape-
can't sprinkle it.
The maintenance on this will be a nightmare based on what we've seen as precedent, so
Yep.
it's not a simple solution.
All right.
It's a good
Okay.
idea.
Okay, one of the things I'm thinking is that what we're grappling with a little bit is that there's a limited amount of space, there's misalignment, people need to get out of their cars, but we want to have something green and we want to have something permeable there. And maybe what we should be doing is working out some kind of proportion that the planning department works with the applicant to achieve a proportion of pervious planted surface as opposed to concrete wheel surface. And if that means taking out the concrete between the wheel strips in front of the garage, fine. If it means changing the direction of the concrete, fine. Maybe we should approach it that way.
I have a suggestion.
Please.
My suggestion is that we compile your suggestions, your comments. You have consensus on a lot of items. There's a
do.
few things that you don't necessarily have
Solutions.
to.
Yeah.
Don't take any action tonight. Have the applicant redraw the proposed landscape plan to reflect all of your comments and come up with solutions to the things that you've identified that maybe don't have specific solutions, like the driveways, and have him come back to your August meeting for an approval of a plan that is then in place, and you can just approve it.
Would that include the variance if we decide to delete one of the parking requirements?
Well, it could, in consulting the code. However, the planning commission cannot on its own initiate such a variance. That has to be requested, has to be applied for by the property owner. So it would be up to the property owner if they want to ask to eliminate a parking space.
Right, and so if the property owner, assuming that this is the direction that you would like to give, then if the property owner wishes to seek a variance, a parking variance, then he would be able to incorporate that into his plans or as an option B or something like that when he returns to you.
And if he does request that, then we will notice that as a part of the public hearing for the next meeting.
Okay, so yes, come forward if.
In between where the cars are parked.
Yes.
There's this much space. So when say I'm coming and visiting and there are cars parked, where am I supposed to go through? I'm going to be stepping on whatever the plants are in there. We have to provide some sort of a pathway for other people to go through when the cars are parked. So
Well, one of the points was that those are not really legal places for the cars to stay. They're not supposed to be staying there. I think what you need to do is refine your plan, make it very clear. I think you would be well advised to talk to somebody that designs the irrigation system and that can come up with something that is implementable and buildable and that will work for your needs here and meet the concerns that you have heard us talk about today. I think, is it pretty clear the points that we are directing you to do as far as all the backyard provisions, all the backyard planting?
You said that we plant in the back, and we are okay with the backyard.
Okay, but we want to have a plan about what you're going to plant, how you're going to irrigate it, so that we know that it's going to work.
Oh, drip system we are going to do. So we'll do the drip system, which we have already, how we are going to do. We will.
Right.
We have our designer with us. I mean, if you want to tell him, I mean, he's
You've
the
been
one who
hearing
designed-
this, right? So you can come up with a landscape plan that is clear, that's specific, that provides low maintenance, bay-friendly, drought-resistant planting, that screens on the west side where there is the planting area there, that provides something that's going up, and that will be well-maintained and properly irrigated.
Going up means, I mean, I didn't get that part. Going up means,
In the very narrow area on the west side behind the back house,
right.
there's enough room for vines to go up.
Oh, I
and
see,
that would be,
okay.
yeah.
So if we're given
And no fence in the front.
I think the
So,
plans should also very carefully delineate and describe the irrigation system.
Right.
An
We need
irrigation
a
plan.
landscape plan and an irrigation plan.
I think staff is pretty clear on your direction. And what we would do is we would ask that the applicant meet with us,
Okay.
you know, in the coming weeks, and we can go over with them what we have heard you say tonight, and maybe they can bring in a preliminary plan, and we can tell them whether or not we think it complies with what the direction you've given. And they're going to have to work on a solution to these parking spaces and wheel strips.
Do we have consensus on kind of the rear area and the patio between and the other patios? I kind of feel like that's too large, too much paving. I wasn't clear whether we kind of had consensus on that though or not.
Well, I think the paving on the back, the cement blocks should be removed and made permeable somehow. You could put the same paving blocks down, but have a base underneath that the water could flow through.
It has sand underneath.
The checkered board pattern is permeable.
Excuse me?
The checkered patterned concrete is permeable.
Then it
Those-
goes into sand, does that count?
Yeah, it
Right.
does.
Yeah.
Set in sand.
Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're clear on the direction that we want, and you're clear on the direction that you need to work with staff in order to move this forward?
I'm sorry, Chair. I'm not clear on what have you decided, what consensus have you reached on the backyard? Do you want
Okay,
the
we-
checkered board and the concrete to remain or not to remain?
Let's take a straw poll here. I'm okay with the paving remaining as is between the houses.
Okay.
I
I'm
would
also-
like only the checkerboard area or kind of that proportion of paving.
In other words, we'd remove the concrete
Correct.
and just have the checkerboard paving. I would agree with that.
I'm fine with having both the checkerboard and the concrete. However, I would like to see the rest of the ground plane that is not covered in concrete or checkerboard be landscaped
Sure.
and not rock.
Okay.
Stephen, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great area between the two structures, so I would personally try to make it more uniform. Make it, the checkerboard doesn't wear very well. I mean, it looks like it's fading already. It's a red color.
It's only been there a year.
It looks kind of marginal, but
No, I think
No, it's
the
the picture
picture.
maybe.
It's the picture.
yeah.
I'm okay with the backyard as it is, the paving.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have complete consensus, but I think what we need to have is a plan to, another plan to respond to, and I would think that if it addresses all our other concerns real well, we could probably hash out the remaining issue about the backyard, but I mean, we're not coming to a conclusion tonight, so.
I'm really a lot more concerned about getting rid of some of the pavement in the front yard
Mhm.
versus the backyard. And let's put the attention there and work on getting great planting in the backyard and the space that is available.
Okay.
All right, so I'll make a motion to continue this to our August meeting.
I think, I mean, that's fine, but I think the chair can just direct that if.
I'm going to continue this until the August meeting. We're not having a meeting in July, so we're having an August meeting. So you have a couple of months to work with staff and really try to come up with a plan. No. No, we're not. We need a solution to the front of the building. We need something that works, that has plants, that works, that's going to work for you. It may mean moving wheel strips, it may mean to,
Is the problem with the hot car sitting on the pavement, with the hot oil?
I think you need to work with somebody. It's done in many places and it works in many places.
Because otherwise, why would we doing it again?
You know, we don't have that much cement, and I went around on 45th Street and took pictures, and I want to share those pictures with you.
No, we've all looked at the site,
So,
we've
I
all
mean-
looked at the street, and we're not gonna argue at this point. So if you come back with a plan, we'll look at the plan and we'll see how that goes.
So we can't
Thank
do
you.
anything in the backyard either, or can we start doing
We're-
something in the backyard?
We're asking for a plan for what you're going to do in the backyard, because part of the issue is that there's been miscommunication about whether you are permitted to go ahead with anything, so I
We
would
did,
not.
and I would like to bring those people and say
right
in
now.
front of me that they did not tell me to do it.
We'll get this resolved, but it's going to take until the next planning commission
Okay.
meeting to do that. So if you work with staff, I hope that we can come up with a resolution that will work well for you and for your tenants, and that will not give the neighbors too much grief, and that will come up with something that will work all the way around. But staff has heard what the concerns of the commission are, and you've heard what our concerns are. So we're not just saying, tear out everything that you've done since 2005. We're saying there are areas that you need to work on and show us how you're going to resolve. And then we'll come up with a solution that'll be okay for everybody.
And I would like to add one more thing. You should not do any further work on the property regarding the landscaping.
We haven't done any since last time they
Fine,
told us.
so don't.
Yeah,
Don't do any further work until
absolutely
the
not.
commission makes a decision on this,
Okay.
hopefully at their August meeting.
Yeah, and so in 2 months, we should have everything just fine. Thank you very
We
much.
just can't make it to August meeting. Can we postpone it? My son is getting married.
Yeah, you can postpone it, certainly.
Okay.
The issue is don't do any more work
Till we
until
talk to you.
there's a resolution to
Okay.
this. So if you want to, work out the time that you're going to come back, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, and thanks, everybody. This is commissioner comments.
Not done yet.
Missed you, Frank.
Charlie?
Goodbye.
I want to say thank you for your patience of sitting through for an extra hour when you didn't, and Deborah, thank you, too. And I
Anything
hope
for a
that we
drink,
can,
huh?
Miss you, Deborah, too.
Yeah, yeah. I guess Deborah was cleaning out her office for the last several hours. All right.
Well, we better get over there.
Okay. Any other comments? Meeting is adjourned.